You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Meets the Dgrayman. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Discarab on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. What had started out as a simple evening was quickly spiraling down into pure and utter chaos. After Alan swore that he'd defeat Kei's boss to free Mr. Aichi's family from debt, he and Mr. Aichi were shoved in a car and sent on a journey into the city's underbelly. They were driving for what seemed like hours into the night, passing street after street and block after block, before finally nearing their destination. "The boss knows that we're coming, right?" Bingo asked Hibai from the driver's seat. The man in question nodded, before waving a hand through the air, signaling everyone in the car to keep quiet. "Yeah, I texted him the second the brat brought it up. He's ecstatic. It's been a long time since he's been able to crush somebody." Hibai snickered as he held his mobile phone up to his left ear. After a few seconds of ringing, Alan heard a muffled voice answer the call. "Hey boss, it's me." Yeah, don't worry, he isn't going to run away," the thug mumbled as he playfully picked one of his ears. "Oh, really? Tilda, I never knew you could be so merciful, but okay." With that, Hibai turned around to face Alan and Aichi. His smug grin reminded Alan of Cross, and made him want to punch him. "Hey, you two, you should be thankful. Before we get to the base, the boss has decided that he'll give you one last chance to back out." As Alan expected, Mr. Aichi, who was sitting next to him, seemed to jump at the offer. However, before he could even utter a word, Alan raised up his arm to stop him. "No, I'm not backing out. I agreed to the duel, and I plan to follow through with it." His decree was met with a horrified gaze from Mr. Aichi, while the thugs were actually rather impressed. "Wow, this kid really does have some platinum class ball, doesn't he?" Hibai laughed out as he leaned back into his car seat. "Well, you just keep that fire burning, kid. You might as well nurture it while you can. Before our boss beats it out of you, that is." Yet again, Alan was reminded of the thugs that extorted him back when he was training with Cross. Compared to those men, in those days, these three looked like little kittens. "Alan," Mr. Aichi started. However, before he could even get a word out, the immigration agent stopped himself. On numerous occasions throughout the ride, he had tried his best to give Alan some information on the Kei's boss, such as his identity and what the man's quirk was. But each and every time, Alan refused his information. It wasn't because he was being overly prideful or anything like that, far from it. After all, Alan knew quite well how valuable such intel could be. However, he had a feeling that, if he didn't shut him up, Hibai and the other two thugs would have. Every time that Mr. Aichi tried to speak on the subject, Alan noticed Hibai's and Bingo's fingers start to twitch. It was a reaction that he had seen a lot back when he was playing poker. Whatever Mr. Aichi knew clearly agitated them, and so, to avoid poking the hornet's nest, Alan made sure that he stayed ignorant. Luckily, his little ploy worked, and when both of them arrived at their destination, neither of them had so much of a scratch on their bodies. "So, Mr. Thug, are you certain that it's okay for me to fight on behalf of Mr. Aichi's family?" Alan asked Hibai as they stepped out of the car. A cool mist had overtaken the parking lot they were in, which, in more ways than one, reminded Alan of a graveyard. "As long as it's just you, and no one else, the boss won't have any complaints about a proxy fighting Mr. Aichi's battle," Hibai mumbled as he chuckled slightly under his breath. "But, then again, even if there was somebody else fighting alongside you, I doubt it would matter. After all." As the thug spoke, a perfectly timed gust of wind blew the fog out of the parking lot, allowing Alan to finally get a glimpse of where he would be fighting. "There's no way that you'll be able to take down one of the top 100 heroes." It was then that Alan got to see the giant glowing sign hanging above the building they were all standing in front of. And, after reading what it said, Alan felt the air leave his lungs. Metal Meister Hero Agency. Alan tentatively mumbled the building's name. He wouldn't lie, he definitely wasn't expecting this. After his little moment of shock, Hibai and the rest of the thugs immediately burst into fits of laughter. Mr. Aichi also wasn't doing too hot. His face was completely contorted with rage, so much so that his forehead's veins were practically about to pop. Now I know why Mr. Aichi hates Metal Meister so much. Alan was close to slapping himself. A corrupt official. He should have known that's how it was. Back in the days when he relied on poker to live, he had swindled more than a few politicians and policemen who were using taxpayers' money as collateral. Sometimes, if the situation was dire, they'd even send hired goons after him. I never get tired of seeing that face, Hibai said as he wiped a tear from his left eye. I always love watching the boss crush confident little pricks like you. Now come on. You agreed to do this yourself, after all. After shaking the surprise off of his face, Alan looked up, confidence brimming in his eyes, and headed into the building. All things considered, it was a fairly normal office complex. The lobby was, of course, filled with various sculptures and pieces of art, but it wasn't anything that he hadn't seen before. Several late-night stewards and stewardesses were rushing around, each one carrying multiple files worth of paperwork. It's almost like a mini version of the Black Order, Alan thought as he accidentally let a nostalgic smile spread across his face. However, this pleasant moment was immediately destroyed when he heard Hibai start to yell. "Hey boss, it's me. I've got 2 customers here that want to discuss business," Hibai yelled, his voice reverberating through the relatively empty building. Soon afterwards, from the rafters above, Alan heard something rushing towards them. With every step, the building shook with a notable thud, until, finally, the source of the shaking arrived. Like a blinding meteorite, something inexplicably shiny jumped off of the 3rd-story balcony above, and then plummeted down to the surface. "Hibai, bingo, you two should know better than to keep me waiting," the strange object, who was obviously a man, said as the repeating thuds drew even closer to them. Eventually, after the man got close enough, Alan was finally able to get a good look at him. So this is Metal Meister, Alan thought as he stared at the corrupt hero. Metal Meister was definitely a big enough man. He was close to 7 feet tall, and every muscle on his body had been built up to the point of near absurdity. His hero costume was just as, if not more, ridiculous looking. It appeared to be a form of chainmail. However, resting on the surface were thousands of tiny lights. Each one was smaller than a fingernail, but were brighter than industrial-grade spotlights. Finally, there was a long flowing cape hanging off of the hero's back. The glass the lights were made out of seemed to be hardened, almost as if they were crafted from steel. "HMPH, I thought you'd be taller," Meister grumbled as he smirked cockily down at Alan. "You know who I am, boy? You should, considering where you've been staying," the humongous hero said as he scratched the tip of his nose. "Be careful, Mr. Walker. He has the ability to turn organic matter into heavy elements. One touch and it's all over," Aichi whispered in Alan's ear. After taking a moment to process that information, Alan nodded and locked his gaze with Metal Meister. Well, you've got spunk, I'll give you that," he said as he turned around, the ground shaking in his wake, and motioned for them to follow. "Come on, we can't do battle out here where the public can see us." With no other option available to him, Alan just nodded and followed the hero through the building. Eventually, after quite a few flights of steps, they arrived at what looked like Metal Meister's office. It was a giant room with multiple visible supports and no windows. A desk, which Alan assumed belonged to the corrupt hero, was tucked away in the back right corner of the office. "Tell me, boy, why do you think a hero like me would bother entering the debt-collecting business?" the hero in question asked as Hibai and the other 2 thugs scurried off to the room's edges. "If they're acting like that, the fight's probably going to start soon," Alan thought as he stared intently at Metal Meister. Not wanting to be rude, he gave the hero his answer. "Well, to be perfectly frank, I think it's because you're greedy. Hero work pays well, but it isn't exactly easy. I'm certain that, for a man like yourself, you wanted to branch out to find more stable forms of income." Out of all of the corrupt cops and officials he met in his time, at least 60% of them did what they did for monetary reasons. And Alan was certain that Metal Meister was no different. Well, that's surprising. A kid your age would normally completely disregard that question and just call me a villain. You're the first I've met who's managed to connect it to the dangers of my official job." When Alan heard that, he scoffed. It wasn't that surprising. He could tell just by looking at Metal Meister that he wasn't a courageous person. There wasn't anything physical that tipped him off about this trait. It was just that, after he devoted years of his life to fighting in the Holy War, he started to learn how to read a person's character. Playing poker definitely helped in this endeavor, and after a few months of practice, he could reliably tell what sort of people were reliable or not. "Are you going to keep talking?" Alan started as he raised his fists up into the air. It was time that he finished this. "I thought we were going to fight." Yet again, Metal Meister chuckled. He truly saw him as nothing more than a child. "'Kay, you obviously aren't from around here, boy. There's a procedure to these kind of things," the man said as he waved one of his arms towards Hebai. "Hey, Hebai, go grab my compensation file. It should be on my desk." After said file was safely in his hands, Metal Meister opened it, smiled, and turned back to Alan. "First off, boy, before we do this, we have to agree upon your prize." "My prize?" Alan asked as he confusedly tilted his head. He wasn't sure what the corrupt hero was going to say, but it certainly wasn't that. When the man saw his confused visage, all he could do was grin and chuckle. "Look at you, you've got absolutely no idea what I'm talking about," Metal Meister said as he let out a sigh. "DMN, this is why I hate dealing with proxies." After taking a moment to frustratingly kick the floor, he started to explain. "Look, we aren't villains who cause chaos for the fun of it. Even though it may be strong for you to believe, little syndicates like ours are still expected to uphold certain values. The most important of said values being that everyone gets paid their due share, and that includes you as well. Boy, since you're a proxy, you have a right to ask for compensation should you win. Of course, this is honestly more of a formality, but I'm still required to tell you about it." "Compensation," Alan mumbled out loud as, for a second, he stumbled around like an idiot. Do Yakuza actually do that? That sounds too fair to be right, Alan thought as he scratched his head. Then again, he obviously isn't expecting me to win, so, like he said, he's probably just saying it as a formality. He fully expected Metal Meister to jump him without warning, but, at least for now, it appeared that the crooked hero wasn't completely without tact. After a while, Metal Meister snapped his fingers together. It appeared that he had an idea. "Oh, I know. What about a citizenship and identification documents?" the hero said as he crossed his large, muscular arms. "If you beat me, my company will provide you with all of the documents you need to live here in Japan. If you beat me, that is." The man's cocky tone was really starting to get on Alan's nerves now. He obviously didn't think much of him. In more ways than one, that attitude reminded him of Kanda. "If that's what I need to get this fight underway, then okay. Now then," Alan hissed as he raised his arms up into the air. "Why don't we get started?" Like waving a red flag in front of a mad bull, Metal Meister immediately smirked and started to slowly walk towards him. With every step, he playfully stretched his arms and legs, almost as if he were getting ready for a light workout. "Heh, I'm glad you agreed." The man started as his eyes, like that of a hawk, ran over Alan's body. "Since this is a duel, boy, as a matter of principle, it's standard conduct to announce our quirks before fighting. You obviously already know mine. I can turn anything living into metal. So, tell me, what quirk do you have that makes you think you can beat one of the world's top 100 heroes?" Now it was Alan's turn to smirk. "None, sadly. I wasn't born with a quirk." He couldn't risk letting the current world learn of his left arm. If the Vatican got wind of his existence, even if they didn't have many records left of the Holy War, his new life would turn into a real mess, real quick. So, even though it would put him at an extreme disadvantage, Alan had to play dumb to his own powers. Thankfully, his perfect poker face fooled Metal Meister and everyone else in the room. After he spoke up, it was almost as if time had stopped for the entire room. "You don't have a quirk? You've got to be lying," Metal Meister mumbled as he stared intently into Alan's eyes. Yet again, his ruse fooled the hero, stopping the man dead in his tracks. "I can't believe it. You're actually serious, aren't you?" he asked. Alan nodded, the fire in his eyes burning just as bright as ever. "Ah, damn it. This isn't going to be a fight if that's how it is. It'll just be a slaughter." Metal Meister groaned out as he frustratingly pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked like a child who had just lost one of his favorite toys. "Mr. Walker, you didn't tell me that you didn't have a quirk. Concede the match now. It's better that you do that and spare your life than risk losing everything over me and my family," Aichi called out from the sidelines as Metal Meister's thugs laughed. However, Alan just ignored him and kept walking forward. "So, even though you don't have a quirk, you still want to fight me?" Metal Meister sighed. "Since you're young, I'll give you one last chance." Listen to that man, and before the corrupt hero could even finish his sentence, Alan rushed up to him and drove his right fist into Metal Meister's stomach. He could feel bones crack as he pressed onwards, causing the hero to cough up a few drops of BLD. "What? How are you?" Metal Meister yelled as his body was flung a few feet back. He grunted as he dug his heels into the floor, and after a few seconds of sliding, came to an unceremonious halt. When the hell did he have the time to set up that punch? From what he saw, there was barely a second in between the time when the boy first lunged at him to a fist being burrowed into his stomach. "There's no way that you don't have a quirk. You've got to be pulling my leg." What he just took wasn't the punch of any normal adolescent boy. That's for DMN sure. "Sorry, but I'm telling the truth. You don't have to have a quirk to be strong, after all," Alan said, his voice slightly coy, as he continued his assault, while Metal Meister breathed in, obviously preparing for an attack. Alan took the chance to jump into the air. Immediately after his leap, Metal Meister shot a strange smog out from his mouth. It took mere moments for it to completely envelop where he had been standing. And if Metal Meister didn't stop it, the smog would have quickly overtaken the entire room. Thankfully, the corrupt hero had some common sense, and quickly snapped his fingers together, causing the smog to disperse. "This kid, is he really telling the truth?" Metal Meister thought as he tried to keep his eyes on the boy's moving body. "How can someone move that fast without a quirk? And the way he controls himself, it almost looks professional," he thought as he bit his lip. This entire situation had quickly turned into a huge headache. "CRP, I need to watch my movements." The kid's previous attack had broken a couple of ribs, and he was almost certain that a few BLD vessels had ruptured. "That looks like that hurts," Alan said as he dove into Metal Meister's blind spot and readied himself for another assault. Even though he was certain that he'd done quite a bit of damage to the corrupt hero, Metal Meister was still relatively calm. I guess that professional hero title isn't just for show. Considering that he was fighting one of the top 100 heroes, it was quite obvious how much experience the man had. He took his punches with relative ease and only opened himself up for attacks on rare occasions. Every one of his attacks could only be dodged by the thinnest of margins. There wasn't a single movement wasted, nor a moment where Metal Meister wasn't thinking of his next attack. "He's definitely an amazing fighter, that's for sure," Alan thought as he frowned. "What's wrong, boy? What happened to all of that moxie you had a minute ago?" Metal Meister yelled as he jumped forward, readying his fist for a bone-crushing punch. If this boy truly doesn't have a quirk, there's no way that he'll be able to dodge this. There was only a handful of villains that could avoid his special attack. After he landed it, he'd charge Mr. Aichi for everything he was worth, and then he'd be yet another step closer to a life of luxury. "Take this, flesh-destroying fist." In the blink of an eye, Metal Meister wrapped one of his fists in a cloak of smog and leapt forward. His speed was impressive, far more so than what he'd led the boy to believe. "Catilda, nobody ever thinks that someone as large as me can move this quickly. That's why I always come out on top," he thought with a smile. However, while Metal Meister was prematurely celebrating his victory, Alan had prepared himself for a counterattack. Too slow, he thought as he ran to one of the office's walls and, using the wall as a springboard, jumped behind Metal Meister. After years of fighting akuma that were faster than the human eye could comprehend, Alan had trained his body to its utmost limits. And, since he was a parasite type, things like near superhuman speed came easily. If his body wasn't this fast or strong, without his innocence, he would have perished long ago. "I've got to admit," he thought as he swirled around to face Metal Meister's back, "these attacks really are excellent. Any normal person, even a professional hero, would have struggled to keep up." But, yet again, his experience proved useful. Nearly every day he had to face hordes of akuma, each of which had some sort of unique ability to survive. Needless to say, Fighting a human with a human's reflexes wasn't anywhere near as difficult. He dodged Metal Meister's attacks with relative ease, and before the hero had the chance to react, sent his left fist rocketing into the man's liver. Gah! Metal Meister yelped as he fell to the ground. The corrupt hero, and his audience, was in total shock. Damn it! How did he do that? That setup was perfect. He could feel his body start to churn under the weight of the boy's fist, almost as if someone had stuck an electric drill into his intestines. There, that should about do it, Alan thought with a frown as he took a few steps back, allowing Metal Meister to collapse onto the office's floor. I sure got lucky that his quirk didn't buff his body. He might have been doing well in this battle, he wasn't an idiot. He knew how strong heroes and villains could be. If he had a quirk like All Might's, this could have ended up with me on the ground instead of him. Even though his body was far stronger than the average person, that didn't make him invincible. Most of his strength, after all, was in his innocence and abilities. If he had to face someone who had a quirk that overtook his base strength or was overly destructive, he'd struggle to keep up. But at least for now, this was enough. Boss, Hebai yelped as he and the other thugs ran to Metal Meister's side. Boss, are you okay? As Hebai tried his best to pull the corrupt hero off the ground, the other two thugs drew their pistols and pointed them at Alan. You BSTRD, I'll send you straight to hell, Bingo screeched as he PP his pistol's hammer. However, before he got the chance to fire it, Metal Meister rose from his stupor and stopped him. What are you doing, you fool? Are you trying to smear mud over my name? The man yelled as he forcibly yanked the weapon from the man's hands. Once he was certain that nobody would attack, he sighed and returned his gaze to Alan. SHT, I can't say that I'm not embarrassed to be beaten by some kid with no quirk, but I guess that's life. Metal Meister grunted as he rubbed his belly. Sir, you can still fight, and so can we. Let us kill this kid, Hebai yelped, prompting Metal Meister to smack him aside. What did I say, you dolt? That's not how we do things. If people found out that we just shot everyone that came here to clear their debt, they wouldn't hesitate to notify the Hero Association. And we can't have that. The man said as he let out a breath. And plus, I'm thoroughly beat. With that, Metal Meister reached down to his waist and pulled up his shirt. The wound that lay there was enough to make even Hebai squirm, and caused Mr. Aichi to start gagging. Several ribs were broken, and many were protruding out of his flesh like a porcupine's needles. I'm not sure how you got so strong with no quirk, boy. Even now, I'm in shock. I keep thinking you're lying, but when I stare at your face, I can't help but believe you. Does that mean you give up? You'll leave Mr. Aichi and his family alone now? Alan asked him as he PND his fists together. When dealing with men like this, it was always important to show them who had the most strength. And, thankfully, his message came across, and Metal Meister nodded. Yeah, you won fair and square. If I fought anymore, I'd be endangering my life. The corrupt hero mumbled as he, with quite a bit of pain, pulled himself up off the floor. As he struggled to breathe, Mr. Aichi ran over and playfully smacked Alan on the back. I've got to say, I didn't think you'd actually manage to do it, he said with a laugh. If one looked closely, they could see that Mr. Aichi's eyes were red and swollen. He must be struggling to hold back his tears. Alan thought as he, too, let out a hearty chuckle. With this, your family doesn't have to worry about its debt anymore. Take that as my thanks for helping me out. It was strong to imagine, but this chaos was finally over. However, even though the battle had concluded, there was still more to come. Wait, don't be so fast, Metal Meister whispered as, with his voice hoarse, he stumbled over to the two of them. You've beaten me, so as a good businessman, I've got to give you your compensation. As the man talked, Alan couldn't help but raise one of his eyebrows in confusion. Why are you looking at me like that? He asked Metal Meister as he instinctively readied his body for an attack. The corrupt hero didn't look like someone that had been beaten. In fact, the man seemed almost happy. I doubt that grin is just because you're going to give me some papers, so what's up? There was a glint in Metal Meister's eyes that wasn't there before. The way that he was staring at him was different. Instead of looking at him like he was a kid, Metal Meister's stare seemed to suggest that he was gazing upon an equal. Tell me, Mr. Walker, how would you like to be a hero? Metal Meister asked him in between gasps for air. As his words lingered awkwardly in the air, the first people to break the uneasy silence was, conveniently, Hibai and the other thugs. What? Wait, boss, you can't be suggesting that you're actually planning on… Metal Meister cut the man off. Yes, now shut up, I'm talking to the kid. Or, should I say Mr. Walker? The corrupt hero mumbled as he knelt down and stared into Alan's eyes. Listen, Mr. Walker, there are many things that I am. A villain is one of them. However, I also work as a hero, so, technically, you could say it's my duty to scout out new talents. And, even though you don't have a quirk, you've managed to intrigue me. As Alan listened to Metal Meister's words, he felt a sneeze coming on. Why do I feel that I've been given this speech before? Alan thought as his mind flashed back to the day Cross picked him up from that graveyard. What are you getting at here, Metal Meister? Alan said as he locked his gaze with the heroes. If you haven't noticed, I've beaten you blue and bloody. You should be running me out of this office right now, not offering me a position. Alan couldn't help but find this whole situation suspicious. However, when he saw the strangely pure look in Metal Meister's eyes, he hesitated. There aren't many people in this world that can beat me, and, much to my personal distaste, I admit that you're one of them. I want more than anything to just give you your reward and kick you out, but the man in me wouldn't let me do that. I'm a businessman, I run a company, so when I see someone as gifted as you, I just can't ignore it. As Metal Meister spoke, he took out his wallet, opened it, and showed Alan a small metallic card that rested inside. You, Alan Walker, have the potential to be something great, and I want to help make that happen. If you agree to a few terms, I'll give you your citizenship, papers, and a recommendation to one of the best schools there is. When Alan heard that, a proverbial light bulb turned on in his head. So that's what this is about, Alan mumbled as he glared at the corrupt hero. You're sweetening the pot in return for my silence, aren't you? The smug grin Metal Meister gave him told him all that he needed to know. You're better at reading people than I thought, but yes, that's the deal. If it hasn't already crossed your mind, you're the first in years that has managed to win a bout against me. Mr. Aichi and the people in the slums know to keep their mouths shut, but you're an outsider, so I can't just let you go. And, for obvious reasons, I can't force you to stay silent either. So, that just means I have to buy your word. In return for a life here in Japan, I want you to swear that you'll never mention me, or this place, ever again. Do we have a deal? The hero asked as he raised up one of his hands for him to shake, but Alan didn't take it. Damn it. He cursed as he curled his left fist up into a ball. This offer should be a no-brainer. I should just go report him to the authorities. But if I do, then there's a very good chance that I'll end up deported. At this point, being kicked out of the country was probably a death sentence. He just didn't have the resources to decline Metal Meister's generous offer. And plus, the gambler in him was screaming at him to take it. And so, Alan just stood there, shaking in his confusion as he pondered what to do. However, before Metal Meister could pull his hand away, Mr. Aichi grabbed Alan's wrist and shoved it forward. Mr. Aichi, stop that, Alan yelped as he turned to the man. However, instead of an heroic smile, Mr. Aichi's face was covered in the stain of defeat. You should take his offer, Mr. Walker, the tired immigration agent said as he carefully wrapped Alan's fingers around the hero's. Let's look at this rationally. At the moment, my family is free from his clutches, but you aren't. If you don't take this deal, then there's virtually no way that you'll be able to make it in this land. Sure, it may not be the morally correct thing to do. But sometimes, in life, we all have to make decisions that may go against those feelings. If you want to bring him to justice, then become a hero, or someone who can stand on their own and take him down. However, until that time, it's better that you just take what you can get. Trust me, from this old man to you. Mr. Aichi spoke with the vigor of a wise man, and, as much as it hurt to admit, Alan couldn't help but agree with him. When he was stuck slaving away in that circus, there were many times where he had to steal food or fight to survive. Life is cruel, and most times people don't have the luxury of choosing the morally correct option. I understand, Alan mumbled, clearly defeated, as he shook Metal Meister's hand. Afterwards, Alan heard Mr. Aichi let out a sigh of relief. Thank God, at least now I can rest easy knowing that you won't be stuck out on the streets, he said as he headed for the exit. It appeared that he wanted to get out of that place as soon as possible. And Alan couldn't agree more. And so, after a few more words with Metal Meister, Alan hurried after him. I'll notify you tomorrow when you can head over. I'll be the one recommending you, so you should be accepted in no time at all. Welcome to Japan, Mr. Walker. Metal Meister called as Alan slammed the door behind him. He was still angry at the hero, no, at himself, for taking that deal. But all of that was in the past now. Will you guys be okay by yourselves? Alan asked Mr. Aichi. He had a feeling that, once he left for school, he probably wouldn't be able to see the man again for quite a while. However, in his sadness, Mr. Aichi reached out and smacked him back to reality. Don't get all depressed on me now, you hear? We've only known each other for just under a day. So, after you move in, leave and don't look back. Mr. Aichi's words were stern, strict, and exactly what Alan needed to hear. They didn't leave any room for argument. And so, with his heart somber and full of sorrow, Alan placed a hand over his heart and gave the man a small bow. Again, thank you for everything, he said, causing Mr. Aichi to turn a bit red. Now, there's no need for that. Just be quiet and follow me. I've got a feeling that we're going to have to get a taxi. And since we don't have to worry about you being deported, I'm going to work you for all you're worth before you head out. The slums could use a person like you right now, Aichi said as he looked away from Alan. Goodbyes like this were always the hardest, after all. You better live your life to the fullest, got it? He mumbled as he lightly scuffled Alan's hair. Once he stopped, Alan smiled, nodded, and hurried on ahead to the main road. I'll do my best, I promise. And, with that, a chapter on Alan's life came to a close. However, as with most things in life, this ending was only the beginning of an entirely new ordeal. As the pair headed off towards Mr. Aichi's home, readying themselves for the future, Alan looked out the window and thought to himself, a hero? Can I really be one? Yua High School's cafeteria was absolutely brimming with activity as students rushed around the halls. Several people, hoping to get first pick of the soft drinks, raced to the vending machines with unparalleled vigor. Midoriya, over here, Uraraka called out as her green-haired classmate stumbled through the crowd. She, along with Ida, Ashido, Aoyama, and Todoroki, were all sharing a table in the back of the cafeteria. Midoriya, who was clearly relieved to have found a place to sit, happily trotted over and joined them. Thanks, Uraraka. For a second there, I thought I was going to be swept up by the crowd. Midoriya mumbled with an awkward laugh. As they all ate over the usual gossip and small talk, a familiar voice rocketed over the crowd. What was that? You're getting pretty cocky for a couple of extras, Midoriya sighed when he heard Bakugo's banshee-like yell. It just wasn't a normal day if he didn't scream at least once. Do you have any idea what we'll be doing in gym class today? Ashido asked them as she playfully poked her food with a plastic fork. No, I don't, sorry, Uraraka mumbled as she nibbled on an apple. Midoriya, who also didn't have an answer, just shook his head. Well darn, I guess the only option then is to just wait and see. Ugh, Ashido whispered as she rested her head on the table. The half-bug hero sure did like to be overdramatic. I heard that we're having a joint PRD with Class B, Siro told them as he walked by their table. My bet is that they'll probably be combat exercises. I've been wanting to test out a new attack for weeks. Midoriya couldn't help but let out a light-hearted chuckle at his classmates' enthusiasm. After that whole mess with Eri and Overhaul, the only thing Midoriya wanted was some sense of normalcy. Do any of you guys know how Bakugo is doing at his remedial classes? Midoriya asked his classmates as he popped a piece of broccoli into his mouth. I heard that he's been wrestling with children. Ashido chuckled out as she stretched one of her arms. That's probably why he's been so on edge recently. Does Bakugo really strike you as the sort of person who'd be good with kids? When Midoriya and the others thought of that, all of them couldn't help but laugh. Good point, he definitely wouldn't like that. It'd drive him crazy. As Midoriya wiped a tear from his eye, he craned his neck back and searched the cafeteria for the rest of his class. Where is everybody? He asked out loud as he raised one of his eyebrows. Even though the cafeteria was packed, after taking a good look at the place, it was obvious that there weren't as many people filling the stalls. They've probably all gone to get a look at that new transfer student from England, or something along those lines, Siro said as he scratched his scalp. However, when he told his classmates that, all that the tape man was answered with was confused stares. What? Don't tell me you guys have only heard about this now, he asked. Midoriya and Uraraka nodded. I mean, I'm not surprised, but I thought that the window for transfers closed last semester, Ashido mumbled, clearly confused, as Shiro sighed. And here I thought you'd be the first one to know, Shiro exclaimed as he pulled up a chair and got himself comfortable. Normally, you'd be right, but apparently this kid is different. I heard that he got a recommendation from some big-shot hero here in Japan. When he mentioned heroes, Midoriya's ears perked up and he instantly reached for one of his notebooks. A hero recommended him. That must mean that he's going to be enrolled in our course. Do you have any idea who pointed him towards Yua? Midoriya asked as he flipped through page after page of hero-related information and biographies. That I do know, it was Metal Meister. When Shiro said that, much to everyone's shock, Midoriya practically leapt out of the table. Metal Meister, Midoriya yelped, gathering the attention of everyone in the cafeteria. Sorry. He apologized as he slunk back into his chair. Once everyone's eyes was off him, he turned back to Shiro, his eyes full of a childlike glee, and flipped to the aforementioned heroes section in his notebook. Are you sure, Shiro? He asked. His classmate nodded. Why? Is it really that impressive? Ida wondered as Midoriya shook his head. Yeah, Metal Meister is one of the world's top 100 heroes. He went here at UA, but until now, I don't believe that he's ever recommended anyone. If this transfer student managed to convince someone like him, he must be really something. As Midoriya filled their head with a near textbook description of Metal Meister and his agency, all his classmates could think about was that one word, recommendation. Oh God, I really hope that he's not going to be another flashy powerhouse like Todoroki. Shiro mumbled, causing his scarred classmate to glare at him. No offense, Todoroki, it's just that I don't want to be overshadowed by you guys, you know? Shiro exclaimed as he did a cheesy pose. As he, Todoroki, and several others continued their conversation, Midoriya caught a glimpse of Mr. Aizawa rushing through the halls. He sure looks angry, Ashido whispered as she flicked a small toothpick at Shiro. Yeah, he does. Their teacher was infamous for his grumpy moods, but this was different. The only other time I've seen him this angry was at the start of the school year. Mr. Aizawa was known for being strong on his students, after all. Could this be because of the transfer? Midoriya thought as he scratched his chin. That would make sense. The last transfer student we got was Tsunatori, and she was put in Class B. Simple logic would dictate that, if there was another transfer, the administration would place them in Class A. Hey Tilda, I wouldn't worry about it. He probably just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, Ashido said as she, Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, and everyone else got up out of their seats. Midoriya, who had no idea what was going on, simply looked on with an adorable look of panic. Dang, calm down, Midoriya. We're just going to go welcome our new classmate. Ashido cooed as she patted him on the back. How do you know that they've arrived? Midoriya asked. In response, Ashido just pointed to one of the windows. Several students had lined up alongside them, no doubt eager to get a gander at the new hero candidate. Would those people crowd up like that for anything less? Shiro said, yawning the entire time as he headed towards the stairs. Midoriya, not wanting to be left behind, quickly scarfed down his meal and hurried after his friends. Wait up, guys. I'm coming with you. Midoriya greedily gulped down air as he leaned against one of the large brick walls. Ashido and Shiro practically sprinted all the way to the courtyard. They were so quick that he seriously debated using his quirk to catch up to them. However, after a minute or two of running, he and his friends finally arrived at the source of all of the commotion. While there wasn't technically a crowd, there was an uncountable number of onlookers. Either students staring at them from their classrooms or from the cafeteria, the transfer students' arrival had garnered quite a bit of attention. Right on cue, the front gate opened and a boy wearing UA's uniform walked in. So that's our new classmate? Todoroki thought out loud as they all got a good look at the transfer. He had snow-white hair and a strange scar running down the left side of his face, but besides that, he looked relatively normal. Come on guys, are we playing strangers? Let's go say hi, Ashido exclaimed as she jogged closer to the new arrival. However, before she could get close enough, Mr. Aizawa walked out of the front entrance. The angry glare he had stopped the bug woman in her tracks and sent a chill down every onlooker's spine. Alan Walker, I presume? their teacher said as he stared at the boy. The poor transfer student, obviously not knowing what was going on, simply froze like a statue. "Me?" he asked as he hesitantly pointed at himself. When Mr. Aizawa rolled his eyes, the transfer student placed a hand over his heart and bowed. "Ah, yes, hello sir. My name is Alan Walker. It's a pleasure to meet you." It was a normal introduction, all things considered. However, even after all of that, Mr. Aizawa didn't stop glaring at the boy. Could the transfer student be the reason why Mr. Aizawa is so angry? Midoriya thought as his face contorted in his confusion. But why would that be? Did he do something to Mr. Aizawa? Maybe he offended him in some way? Possible answers swirled around his head as he struggled to come up with a logical explanation for this standoff. However, before either party broke the silence, a familiar voice rang through the air. "Mr. Aizawa, I see you're drilling some fear into the new student. That's good. It keeps them on their toes." No matter how many times Midoriya heard that voice, its majestic ring had never dulled. "All might," he called out, almost on instinct, prompting his tutor to give him a thumbs up. He was still the same thin person he always was, but even though he was weak, the authority he commanded hadn't changed. After letting out a courageous laugh, the aforementioned hero turned his attention back to Aizawa. Now, my friend, I know that this is your ritual and all, but why don't you say hello? At this rate, the poor lad's gonna run away." All Might said as their homeroom teacher scowled. "As I thought, you didn't read his application, did you?" the man hissed, causing All Might to let out a carefree whistle. After letting out a tired sigh, Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose and walked down the steps to meet their new classmate. "Kid, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want you here," he growled, his words shocking even All Might. Sure, Aizawa was a tough teacher, but Midoriya never heard him say anything like that before. However, when they heard what the begrudged instructor had to say next, it all made sense. The hero position is strong and dangerous. It isn't a place for someone with no quirk or power. For a second, it was so quiet in that courtyard that one could even hear a pin drop. No quirk? Is he serious? No, I must have misheard him. Midoriya thought, his mind in shambles, as he looked over at his classmates. It seemed that everyone, including All Might, were having similar reactions. And as their brains were racing to fill in the gasps, Aizawa continued. "If it weren't for your recommendation, and Metal Meister's testimony that you defeated him in open combat, I would have petitioned the administration to strike your application from our records." Yet again, Aizawa's words shocked everyone who heard them. When All Might gasped, the man turned around and scowled at him. "Please try to keep up with your paperwork, All Might. I thought that you already knew about this." "I apologize. I was busy, but are you serious?" All Might mumbled, his tone frantic, as he pointed at the transfer student. How in the world could he have beaten Metal Meister without a quirk? I've worked with that man before, and he's tough to bring down in a straight fight. Doing it with a normal human's body, well, that's impossible? Aizawa finished All Might's sentence. "Yeah, I thought that as well. Metal Meister definitely isn't the strongest hero out there, but he is still one of the best heroes I know." As he spoke, Aizawa grunted and turned his attention back to the student, who was just politely waiting for them to finish their conversation. "And, since it was confirmed by the man himself, that means that I have no grounds to deny your application." "Huh, well that's a relief," the boy said as he let out a nervous chuckle. Yet again, he bowed to both Aizawa and All Might and looked up. "Thank you for coming out here to see me. I promise that I'll live up to my recommendation." Midoriya didn't know what it was, but something in him made him want to trust what the transfer was saying. And with every word, Midoriya noticed Mr. Aizawa's mood improve. Maybe it was because of the boy's good manners, or perhaps it was due to his excellent Japanese. Either way, it didn't seem like the instructor could stay mad at him. Well, I've got to admit, you're less confident than I thought you would be," Aizawa said as he moved closer to the transfer student. "Regardless of how it happened, the point still stands that you managed to defeat a pro. Even amongst those with quirks, something like that is rare. I was angry because I thought you'd let that victory go to your head, but it appears I was wrong." Aizawa fully expected that he'd be dealing with another, weaker, bakugou. It made sense that he'd be annoyed. However, he was wrong. While he was apologizing, the transfer student smiled and raised one of his arms. It's fine, to be honest, I was expecting this sort of reaction, he said as he and Aizawa shook hands. Don't get conceited, boy, I'm still not convinced that you belong here. There has never been a quirkless hero, and frankly, I don't think there ever will be. All I'm saying is that I've accepted you into my class, and that's it. His words were harsh, but they were the truth. However, instead of backing down at Aizawa's verbal lashing, their new classmate nodded and started to make his way up the steps. If that's all you think about me, then I'm happy. I'm looking forward to this semester, Mr. Aizawa, the boy told him as he neared the front entrance. However, before he had the chance to open the door, Aizawa stopped him. Wait, Mr. Walker, don't be so hasty, he said as he jabbed a thumb towards where Midoriya and the rest of class were standing. After this PRD is gym, so why don't you go introduce yourself to your classmates before heading over? They'll be able to show you where it is. Really? Thank you, I'll go ahead and do that, the transfer student said as he secured his backpack and headed back into the courtyard. As he walked, several students' gaze followed his back, almost as if they were staring at some alien creature. Normally, a person would have cracked under so much pressure, but the transfer student stood strong. It's just like back when I first arrived at the order, he thought as he looked up into the sky. The clouds danced like clowns out of a circus as a strong wind blew them away. As he watched this, he frowned and stared down at his left hand. I'll need to be careful to not ruin this path. If this was the road he chose, then he refused to be knocked off it. High school life, I hope it's as good as the stories make it out to be. In all honesty, he was terrified at what awaited him on this unknown path. However, with that said, one thing was certain, this was the start of something great. Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes? Ashido exclaimed in a half-joking manner, making their new classmate blush. With the bumbling energy of a bee, she immediately twirled around and introduced herself. My name's Mina Ashido, it's a pleasure to meet you. When she shook the newbie's hand, Midoriya couldn't help but wince. It almost looked as if she were trying to tear the poor boy's arm off. Anyways, she started after finishing the handshake of a lifetime. These guys are my buddies, and your classmates. The one with the glasses is Tenya Ida, you might know his family name. That cutie is Ochako Uraraka, she can manipulate gravity, it's awesome. Then there's Shototodoroki, I'm certain you've heard of him. This here's Hantasiro, he's got tape in his shoulders. The one who looks like he has broccoli for a head is izukumidoriya. And finally, the flashy kid's name is Yuga Aoyama. There's a couple others, who I'm certain you'll get to meet at the gym, but that's everyone in this group. As Midoriya contemplated his vegetable-like style, their classmate smiled and gave them each a small bow. It's a pleasure to meet all of you, my name's Alan Walker. In some small way, watching him bow made all of them feel a bit embarrassed. It was the way he spoke that did it for Midoriya and Ashido, for he didn't speak to them like a fellow classmate would. He addressed each and every one of them with the utmost respects, almost as if he were a butler waiting on some regal lord. He's one hell of a gentleman, I'll give him that much, Zero thought as he struggled to keep on a straight face. After that, all of them took a few minutes to talk about themselves, such as who they were, what they liked, and how the semester had been going so far. All Might, who had been watching from afar, grinned as he walked up to the group of students. I see you're all getting along well, the top hero said as he turned to Alan and nodded. Mr. Walker, I've got a feeling that you'll fit right in with your class. They've all got excellent potential, and I'm sure you do as well. Spoken with the tact of a true warrior. After the usual pleasantries were exchanged, a familiar bell rang through the air, signaling the end of the PRD. Oops, well, guys, I think that's us, Uraraka exclaimed as she, along with Ashido and everyone else, started to make their way towards the gym. Walker, you can go ahead and follow us, we'll show you how to get there. With a smile as bright as the sun, Uraraka led the group with an impressive vigor. After saying his goodbyes to All Might, Alan Walker hurried on ahead, eager to see what the school had to offer. Eventually, only Midoriya and All Might were left standing in the courtyard. They sat in a strange silence for what seemed like ages, before All Might coughed into his hand and broke it. You want to ask him, don't you? He started as he stared at his successors fidgeting back. You want to ask Walker how he managed to get into this school with no quirk? When Midoriya nodded, All Might just chuckled and ruffled the boy's hair. Don't worry, I'm certain that you'll get the chance to ask him one of these days. You are classmates now, after all. It's just, I'm shocked. After what you told me on that rooftop, I really did think the idea of a quirkless hero was impossible. But maybe I was wrong. As Midoriya mumbled, he reached up and nervously squeezed one of his arms. I spent my whole life before meeting you trying to be a hero without any powers. Never, no matter how strong I tried, did I make any real progress on that goal. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's weird. In some ways, when I look at Walker, it's almost as if I'm staring at what I could have been. All Might shrugged as he placed a hand on Midoriya's shoulder. I understand, but I wouldn't say that just yet. Neither of us know who that boy truly is yet. In fact, it may turn out that he's a completely different kind of hero than you'd ever be. All you can do is try your best, and do the most you can to learn from the people around you. Yet again, All Might's words worked magic. And Midoriya, who was previously sulking, instantly shot up like a bright firework. You're right, All Might, I can't let this get me down, Midoriya yelled as he raised a triumphant fist up into the air. However, before he got the chance to go on another one of his fanboy speeches, Uraraka called out to him. Midoriya, what are you doing over there? You're going to miss gym if you don't hurry, she said, snapping the boy back to reality. Oh, shoot, I completely forgot about that, he yelped as he smacked his forehead in shock. See you at gym, All Might, and thanks for encouraging me. With that, Midoriya took off, sprinting in Uraraka's direction. At such a strange sight, the only thing All Might could do was smile. Yua truly was a blessing for his successor, and hopefully, with his guidance, he'd be able to help all of UA's hopeful heroes obtain their dreams. And so, as he walked off towards the teacher's lounge, All Might felt a strange sense of success. However, what he didn't know was that this feeling of accomplishment would soon be turned on its head. For, in that instant, the hero made a mistake. The fatal error that All Might made was one of acknowledgement, or, to be more accurate, the acknowledgement of goals. In some small way, he thought that he'd gained an understanding of Midoriya and his class. But what he didn't know, what he didn't foresee, was that not everyone was the same. Just how every person was different, every individual also goes through their own unique struggles. At that time, All Might believed he was prepared for anything class could throw at him, but that wasn't the case. Everyone was different, and with Alan Walker's arrival, his beliefs, as well as many others, would soon change. 20 minutes later, Alan frowned as he tiptoed out of the bathroom. Thanks to his left arm, he couldn't afford changing into his gym clothes with everyone else, so instead he had to sneak away and do it in secret. Wow, you sure change fast, Walker. A student from Class B, he believed his name was Oasis, said as he walked into the main section of the locker room. All of the male students from Class A and B were in there, some of which were having happy conversations, others not so much. I still can't believe I have to go to class with another quirkless wannabe. One of the more hot-headed students, Midoriya told him his name was Bakugou, yelled out as he slammed his locker shut. When the boy noticed that he had already changed, he scowled and strutted up to him like a lion defending his territory. Well, look who it is. You DMN extra, you better stay out of my way. However, instead of moving, Alan just stared at him with a nostalgic look in his eye. This boy. He reminds me of a couple people. At the Order, there were more than a few finders that acted like this. They'd lash out at anyone, eager to show off their strength to mask their own insecurities. Oh great, Bakugou's at it again. He heard another student, named Kaminari, say as two of his friends, who he overheard were called Kirishima and Mainta, nodded. While Bakugou's anger steadily rose, Kirishima walked over and pulled Alan out of the blast radius. Sorry about that, the red-haired student said as Bakugou cursed and walked out of the locker room. He's actually a pretty nice guy, once you get to know him. Alan smiled as he watched Kirishima go about his routine. Even the most volatile people had friends here. If that wasn't a sign of a healthy school, he didn't know what was. He reminds me of Kanda, in some small way. Alan thought as he thanked Kirishima and closed his locker. Nah, I could tell what kind of person he was from the get-go. Those types just don't like to come out of their shell too often. I'm certain he'll warm up to me. Hopefully. After that, he and Kirishima exchanged a few words, before they all headed out into the gymnasium. Several teachers were there, including Vlad King, Mr. Aizawa, Midnight, and Present Mike. All Might, who had arrived only minutes ago, was busy talking with the teachers about something. "I've got a feeling that we're about to be put through the ringer again." A girl with headphones for ears, Gyro, mumbled as she started doing some stretches. Several other students were doing the same, and, after a while, Alan joined them. To be honest, he wanted to talk to everyone a little bit more before class started. But alas, fate was a cruel MSTRS. The teachers finished their conversation just a minute or two later, and after gathering everyone up, Mr. Aizawa walked up to the front to brief the class. "Alright, you guys, today we're going to be doing a small training exercise in ground gamma. But first, before I give you all the details, I want each of you to put on one of these," he announced as he held up a small white jersey. Immediately afterwards, Cementos came out of the gym's back room carrying a large crate. The contents of said crate was, of course, more similar jerseys in a large variety of styles and shapes. After they had all gotten dressed, Aizawa let All Might take center stage. It's no secret that being a hero is a tough job. Many times, we have to go into chaotic situations without knowing all of the facts. This little activity we prepared will give you the opportunity to know how that feels. At the end of this, you'll have a better idea of how to tackle these situations, and can start thinking up strategies on how you can deal with such disasters. As he talked, All Might took out a small remote and pressed a button. Suddenly, a large screen appeared in front of their eyes. It was a map of ground gamma, or, to be more accurate, a route through the area. Individually, you will all take turns going through this highlighted path. On the way, there will be several faux villains that will try and stop you. Defeat them or sneak past. How you deal with them is up to you. However, the goal here is not to defeat the villains. The goal is just to get to the other side. Yet again, All Might pressed a button, causing a small diagram to show up on the screen. Each of these faux villains will be equipped with a specialized paint gun. If they shoot your jersey, and trust me, they will try, the shirt will instantly turn red. To defeat them, you have to either force or convince them to hold up the white flag that is stored in these weapons. If you find civilians, if there are any, it's also your responsibility to SCRT them to your goal. Afterwards, depending on the shade of your jersey, a grade will be determined. With that, All Might turned the monitor off and took a step back. Since this activity depends on your ignorance, those who are waiting for their turn will stay here. After completing the test, you're welcome to come observe the others in the control center," Aizawa said as he scratched his chin. "The order will be announced at random. When you hear your name, head over to ground gamma. Any questions?" After a few moments of thought, everyone shook their heads. It was obvious that they were all eager to begin. "All right," Aizawa started as he and the rest of the heroes headed for the exit. "Let's get started." 2 hours later, Midoriya ground his teeth together as he prepared himself for a rough landing. Several paintballs whizzed past his head as he dived into cover, eager for a brief moment of respite. "CRP, I can't believe I let them see me," he mumbled to himself as the wall he was hiding behind got covered in paint. "As I expected, this is definitely a lot harder than what All Might described." He was the second to last person to go, so he had no idea how the others did. But if it was anything like what he was experiencing, they must have had some trouble. He had no idea how he managed to make it this far without being hit, but he doubted that his luck would hold out for much longer. When All Might said there'd be some enemies, I didn't think he meant an army. There had to be at least 80 people roaming ground gamma, each one equipped with enough ammo to last them for weeks. Before they had the chance to rush his position, Midoriya quickly jumped up to the nearest rooftop and hid behind one of the railings. Thankfully, he managed to avoid most of the patrols, but of course, he just had to screw up at the end. One wrong step and every person in ground gamma knew where he was. To be honest, it was a terrible situation. However, if he played his cards right, it wasn't an impossible one. "Okay, where am I?" he thought as he looked around for some landmarks. When he noticed a small water tower off to his right, he smiled and let out a sigh. The exit shouldn't be that far away now. All he needed was one good sprint, and he'd make it without a scratch on his jersey. "All right, focus Deku. You can do this," he thought as he lightly smacked his cheeks. Now wasn't the time for worrying, now was the time for action. When the guards that had been chasing him passed by his hiding spot, Midoriya instantly took the chance to jump back down to the ground. After taking a few seconds to check that nobody had seen him, he immediately activated One for All and started to run towards the other side of Ground Gamma. Once he'd gotten up to a pace that'd make Ida proud, he dug in his heels, turned into an alleyway, and saw the finish line. About 200 meters away from his position was a large gate. There, a small drone was hovering above in the sky. My friends are probably watching from there, he thought as he prepared himself for the final lap. However, right when he was about to take off for the last time, something happened. I want my mommy," a child's voice said from an alley near the gate. Soon afterwards, a small kid, who looked to be no more than 7, walked out of the darkness and onto the main road. When he saw that, Midoriya stopped himself and took a moment to think. That's definitely a hired civilian. I'll have to grab him before making my dash to the exit. It was such a simple decision that he almost felt disappointed. However, that didn't mean he was allowed to relax. Before jumping out into the open, he gave the surrounding rooftops and alleys a thorough search. It doesn't look like there's anyone over here. If he had to guess, most of them were probably busy searching the surrounding areas. And so, after taking a breath, Midoriya dived out of the shadows and hurried towards the civilian. "Hey, kid, are you okay?" he asked as he walked up to him. Where did my mommy and daddy go?" the boy cried. Midoriya, who was still busy looking over his shoulder for villains, could only nod and offer the standard script for rescues before he picked the civilian up. "It's okay, we'll find your parents soon," he said as he started to jog towards the main gate, holding the child tight. "I think I did pretty well in there," he thought as he looked down at his flawless jersey. After that, he turned his attention back to the kid and allowed himself to relax a little bit. The exit was only a few meters away, after all. However, right before he stepped through those gates, Midoriya felt something strong crash into his stomach. Ouch! What the heck was that? It felt like he'd been hit by a baseball. "Kid, are you okay?" he started. However, he stopped when he finally saw what had happened. The civilian he'd saved had pressed one of the faux villain's guns against his torso, and, if the red tinge on his jersey was anything to go by, succeeded in firing it. "You lose, hero," the boy said as he raised both of his arms up into the air in victory. Before Midoriya had the chance to do, or even say, anything, he'd already taken his first step through the exit. The second his foot touched the ground, a loud horn blasted through the air, signaling the end of the test. Izuku Midoriya's test is hereby complete, and that was the end of it. The sheer amount of will Midoriya had to give to open the control center's door was insane. He felt embarrassed, weak, and exposed. "I can't believe I let that happen," he thought as he stared at his red jersey in defeat. Slowly, he pulled the iron entrance open, as if he were walking through the doorway to his own demise. He fully expected to be met with minor jeers, some compliments, and a couple of backhanded insults for being so stupid. However, when he walked into that room, he got the exact opposite. "Midoriya, you've finally joined the party," he heard Kaminari say from the main desk. Soon, Uraraka, Ida, and all of his friends came to greet him. And, much to his shock, all of their jerseys were dyed red as well. It wasn't just them, either. Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, all of Class B, and even Bakugou seemed to have taken 1 or 2 hits. "DMN, I really hoped that you'd be able to avoid that little prick." "Are you talking about that kid?" Midoriya asked them. "Yeah," Ida said as he readjusted his glasses. "Apparently, that child is actually a hero with a shape-shifting quirk. He can only transform into a couple of specific things, but his transformations are near perfect. There's no way we could have known that the child was actually a double agent." For the first time in a while, Midoriya swore that he detected a hint of frustration in Ida's tone. "Yeah, you really should have seen Bakugou. That was hilarious. He tried to act all cool by clearing a path for him, and then that kid shot him in the back," Ashido cried out as she leaned over in laughter. "Of course, it goes without saying that I got fooled as well. In fact, I don't think there's a person here who wasn't fooled." When he heard that, even though he knew it was wrong, Midoriya couldn't help but feel a little better about himself. "So it was a fool's errand?" Midoriya asked as he felt a familiar hand tussle his hair. "All might, what are you doing?" he cried out as his personal hero walked into the room. He was carrying a file full of reports and looked absolutely ecstatic. Of course, it wasn't a fool's errand, Midoriya, it was a valuable lesson. He told his successor as he made his way over to where Aizawa and the other teachers were sitting. What's that supposed to mean? Yaoyorozu exclaimed as she rolled her eyes. Are you telling us that you guys knew this task was impossible? The smug smirks on Aizawa's and the teachers' faces told them all they needed to know. Oh, don't lose your head, we aren't going to dock your grade for an error like that, their instructor said as he flipped through a few reports. We hired that hero so you can learn to be more cautious. Heroes aren't the only ones who know how to make strategies. If you let your guard down, one wrong move could spell your defeat. Aizawa scoffed, although I doubt you'd ever actually have to fight a kid out in the field. Once Aizawa had finished lecturing his students, he grabbed a nearby microphone and held it up to his lips. Okay, you're up, Mr. Walker, he said as the camera feed suddenly switched back to the gymnasium, where Alan was waiting. Got it, they heard Walker's voice say from the monitor's speakers as their classmate rushed to ground gamma. It took a few minutes, but eventually, he arrived at the starting line. You're free to go, Mr. Walker, remember to take the assigned route, Aizawa announced as he turned the microphone off. Instantly, Walker went to work and made his way to the nearest obvious hiding spot. How do you think he'll do? Midnight asked as she tapped her fingers against the table. Honestly, no idea, Cementos said as he focused on the screen. It's true that Mr. Walker doesn't have a quirk, but his lack in power might force him to take measures that people like us wouldn't even think about. The infamous ingenuity of the week, huh? Aizawa whispered as he pulled up a chair for All Might to sit in. After the number one hero took his seat, Midoriya and the others also grabbed themselves some spots to rest. It's almost like we're watching a movie. Ashido cooed as she took out some snacks, God knows where she got them, and passed them around. Thank you, Ashido, Kendo said when she was handed a box of gummies. Once they were all good and prepared, they returned their focus to Walker's test. So, that's the transfer student, the one who arrived today, she asked them. Yeah, I believe so, Yaoyorozu said as Kendo tossed her fellow representative a handful of candy. Although, I don't really know what he's like. I was busy with a study group when he first arrived. You're a rocket, Ashido, didn't you lead him here? He's definitely an interesting person, Ashido mumbled as she chewed on a pretzel. He's quite nice, although his manners are a bit too old-fashioned in my opinion. I swear, he talks like a priest. Maybe it's an English thing. As the three of them laughed over their sugary meal, Midoriya smiled and looked back up at the monitor. Wow, he's progressed that far already? He thought as Kaminari let out an impressed whistle. I've got to admit, even without a quirk, he's handling this well. The boy spoke in between sips of soda. And while he was correct that Walker was getting through the gauntlet at a similar pace, something was different. Midoriya could tell just by looking at the teachers, who were all glued to the screen like moths on a light bulb. This kid has nerves of steel, Midnight said, her eyes wide, as they watched Walker effortlessly sneak behind a pair of faux villains. It's almost like he's done this before, All Might thought as his lips curled into a frown. Where in the world did he gain the experience to move like that? Midoriya's and his classmates were good for their age, but the caution Walker showed was different. His skills were they were professional. Still, what truly matters is how he handles the final stretch. Most of Class A and B managed to make it to the end of the gauntlet without getting hit once. So Walker doing the same wasn't that abnormal. And so they all watched in relative silence as their new classmate ran through ground gamma. Within a handful of minutes, he had reached the ending gate. Here we go, Aizawa said as the test's final trap revealed itself. Midoriya, and all of his friends, couldn't help but sigh as they watched the childlike hero take the stage once more. Even Bakugou, who had taken the chance to berate Walker's actions at every chance he got, went silent as the boy made his way to where the civilian was standing. I want my mommy, the hero whined, using the same script that he'd used to fool all of them. It went without saying that Walker took the bait. The transfer student rushed to the hero's side in an instant, knelt down, and placed a hand on the child's shoulder. Are you okay, boy? They heard him ask as his classmates carefully watched the disguised hero's actions. Midoriya's brow furrowed when he saw the hero sneakily draw his gun from a hidden pocket. By now, they were just moments away from Walker meeting the same fate that they did. They all watched as the hero carefully readied his weapon, before pointing it right into Walker's torso. However, right when they thought he'd fire, Walker said something. "Nice try," was all they heard from the boy before he slammed his right leg into the hero's neck. In that instant, everyone in the room, including the teachers, shot up out of their seats. I can't believe it," All Might exclaimed as they watched the disguised hero fly into a nearby wall. Walker's kick had enough power behind it to send the civilian plummeting through the concrete barrier, and was strong enough to make even Midoriya sweat. That attack was almost equivalent to one of Sato's punches. The top hero yelled again as he studied some of the impact numbers. Granted, it still lacked the destructive power that came with a regular strength-enhancing quirk, but it was still incredible. "Are you sure he's quirkless?" Midnight asked as they watched Walker crack his knuckles. Before anyone could answer, Aizawa fished out the student's file, read it, and then nodded. "Yeah, if these numbers are accurate, his raw strength still isn't enough to classify as an ability. Without an ample amount of skill in controlling his opponent, he wouldn't have been able to do what we just witnessed." In Aizawa's opinion, what was truly shocking wasn't the boy's strength, it was how he used it. Not a single movement was wasted, nor was there any delay in his reaction time. He might not have had the power to be considered a quirk user, but with his talent and quick wits, he managed to drag his abilities up to something on a comparable level. "DMN," Kirishima said as they watched Walker wrap one of his hands around the disguised hero's forehead. Before the man had any idea what had happened, their new classmate swiftly slammed the hero's head against the ground, knocking him out cold. And, after taking a moment to check that the faux villain was okay, Walker plucked the pistol from the unconscious hero's grasp and pulled out the white flag that lay inside. "It only counts if I show you guys this, right?" he called out as he showed the flag to the nearest drone he could. Once that was done, he dusted himself off and made his way to the exit. With nobody there to stop him, he walked right through Ground Gamma's back gate with his jersey still as white as snow. For the next few moments, Walker's audience was as quiet as the dead. It wasn't until the horn, which signaled the end of his test, sounded that their voices finally returned to them. And as several shocked voices filled the air, all Midoriya could do was grit his teeth. As, in that instant, All Might's successor witnessed something that he previously thought to be impossible. "A hero without a quirk," he whispered as he clenched one of his hands up into a fist. "Ha, I never thought I'd see the day." The frustration in his voice was evident, as, for what felt like the first time since the semester started, he truly felt defeated. "It's just Mirio all over again, isn't it?" he hissed as his eyebrows narrowed. "What is this, fate? Some kind of cruel joke?" While his classmates were still glued to the monitor, Midoriya just stood there, with tears in his eyes, as his heart stewed in a cauldron of new feelings. "How many times must you remind me of how weak I am?" Yet another person had appeared who was deserving of All Might's power. And, if that wasn't enough, said newcomer was quirkless. They were like him. "I know what you're thinking, Midoriya, so stop it." Before the boy had the chance to fall into yet another pit of despair, the same hand that had granted him his power pulled him out of it. Right when his eyes were about to overflow with tears, All Might walked over and flicked him on the forehead. "Don't worry about how you stand up to others. Remember that I chose you to be my successor, and no matter who crosses our paths, I promise that I'll never change my mind." Like the true hero he was, All Might always knew what to say to lift Midoriya's spirits. As if nothing had happened, the boy's mood improved, his tears vanished, and his smile returned to his face. "Got it," his crybaby successor mumbled as he wiped the last few drops of moisture from his cheeks. "Thanks, All Might." "Don't mention it," All Might laughed as he scratched one of his, slightly pink, cheeks. Even the top heroes got embarrassed, after all. And then, right on schedule, the pair heard the control center's door open. "Ah, Tilda," a familiar voice said as the person who was on everyone's mind walked into the room. "That was a long run. Did you guys do okay, like a hammer on glass?" Walker's arrival shattered the uneasiness that filled the room, causing everyone, who were previously acting like rigid statues, to return to their normal selves. "What's up? Did I do something wrong?" Walker asked, causing Ishido to burst into a fit of laughter. And, just like that, their test came to a close. I still can't believe that you managed to avoid being shot by that bstrd, Kaminari exclaimed as he wrapped one of his arms around Alan's shoulders. After he arrived, he was immediately swarmed by his friends and classmates. To be honest, it was kind of a shock. Oh please, it wasn't that impressive, Alan said as he nervously scratched the back of his head. However, when he saw all of their jerseys, Alan's jaw fell to the floor. Wait, are you telling me that all of you guys got shot? His words hit his classmates like a lead pipe. Ouch, please don't bring that up. It's not good for my pride. Minto whined as he jiggled disturbingly in the corner of the room. Once he was done talking with his classmates, All Might and Aizawa parted the crowd of students so they could get through. It seemed that both teachers were eager to get some feedback from him. You did better than I thought you would, newbie, Aizawa said, which shocked most of Class A. Their instructor wasn't somebody who gave out compliments often. However, Alan knew that they weren't there to congratulate him. He could see it in All Might's eyes. They had something they wanted to say. Tell me, Mr. Walker, how did you figure out that the civilian was a trap? All Might asked, causing everyone to turn their curious gazes back to him. That's a good point, Todoroki started as he crossed his arms. How did you find out? As far as I'm aware, there weren't any obvious clues that would have tipped you off. When Alan heard that, he sighed and locked his gaze with All Might. I guess it wouldn't hurt to tell them the truth, he thought as he struggled to come up with a believable reason. The thing is, when you were giving us the briefing in the gym, Mr. Aizawa, you said that we had to watch out for any civilians. If there were any, that is. I thought nobody caught that slip-up, the instructor whispered as he rubbed his chin. But that's not enough of a reason to warrant your suspicion. There must have been something else. Much to Aizawa's shock, however, Alan just shook his head. No, not really. On the battlefield, nobody knows what's really going on. It's chaos. So, whenever I'm in situations like that, I just assume that every person I come across is an enemy. The words Lavi gave him long ago had saved him hundreds of times, and even now that was living in a world with no akuma, he still strived to follow that rule. Nonetheless, that advice still shocked whoever he told it to, especially the people who were now standing in front of him. Honestly, he couldn't blame them for being shocked, or even appalled. After all, that mentality completely went against everything modern heroes stood for. That's. Aizawa was at a complete loss for words, and so were the other teachers. I'm not sure where you picked that up, but I recommend you drop that habit. Ida was the first of his classmates to break the uneasy stillness. The slight anger in his tone was palpable, but that wasn't surprising. Heroes are supposed to be warriors who protect the weak. You can't just attack everyone because you don't trust them. A wave of nostalgia washed over Alan as he flashed back to when he told Lavi the exact same thing. Ida's reaction was normal, and it was one that his classmates seemed to share. Yeah, I know, and I agree with you, Alan told them, which eased up Ida's verbal assault. It was strong for him to remember that, even though his classmates were around the same age, there was still a world of difference between them. In that case, to avoid being cast aside, he'd have to play the fool. Sorry if my strategy offended you. I guess I just got a little bit nervous. When I saw that he had a weapon, I couldn't stop myself. It's fine, don't worry about it, Ida said as he shrugged. In the end, your hunch was correct, so I can't stay angry. As long as you realize why that mentality is dangerous, I doubt that we'll hold it against you. Unsurprisingly, all of the students agreed with Class A's representative, and, after shaking Ida's hand, that little quip was quickly forgotten. Now that that's over, Kaminari yelled as he pulled Alan aside and cheered. My fellow members of Class A, what do you say to throwing a little party for our newest member? Ooh, that sounds like fun, let's do it. Ashido yelped as she gleefully jumped into the air. With that, Alan's fate was sealed. After getting permission to leave from Aizawa, they practically dragged him outside, their gazes eager and brimming with life. Soon, the teachers left as well, leaving All Might alone in that empty room. That boy, Mr. Walker. He started as he furrowed his eyebrows. Something about that child just didn't feel right. It felt almost like he was hiding something. However, as soon as that thought entered his head, All Might cursed and slapped himself. Nah, I'm just being paranoid, he mumbled as he headed for the front door. I've got a feeling this is going to be a good semester. And then, just like that, another day at UA High came to a close. One of the hardest aspects of being a veteran was the task of reintegrating oneself back into a normal lifestyle. For Alan Walker, this was a particularly thorny undertaking. As someone who lived on the streets for over half his life, and the other fighting in a holy war, a normal schedule was anything but normal. In fact, for him, it was completely foreign. The halls he walked, the smiles he saw, and the conversations he overheard were all new to him. Sometimes it was so jarring that he found it strong to focus. Now was one of those times. "You want me to fill this out now?" Alan asked when his instructor handed him a packet of paperwork. "Those are the forms for registering your codename and outfit. You don't have to turn them in right away, but I do recommend that you get them mailed by the end of the week," Aizawa said as he walked back to his desk. Alan couldn't help but sigh as he stared at all of the complicated recommendations and requirements. This was probably going to take a while. "So, do you have any ideas on what you want your hero name to be?" Gyro, who sat in front of him, asked as several of their classmates came rushing over to his desk. All of them were positively giddy. "Is this really that big a deal?" Alan mumbled as he leaned back into his chair. "Ha, any useless newbie that doesn't understand the power a name holds is worthless," Bakugou yelled as he glared daggers at him. The boy was definitely driven, Alan would give him that. "Like I said, Walker, you don't have to decide right away. Give it some thought and send in the files when you're ready." Aizawa groaned as he slipped into his sleeping bag. Class A's instructor definitely didn't get enough sleep, or at least that's how Alan saw it. What class is after this one?" he asked Midoriya as he pointed absent-mindedly at the class schedule. "Next we have math, I believe, and then lectures on hero law and regulations." Even though those topics sounded so boring, Midoriya announced them with the fervor of an intrigued scholar. He was definitely born to be a hero. Alan thought with a smile as he scratched his head. So far, the classes hadn't been too bad. Part of his basic training was in most of the core subjects, and after he officially became an exorcist, he was required to take remedial classes to further his academic growth. Of course, that didn't mean he was completely in the clear. Some subjects, particularly those related to modern history, went right over his head. But he was doing fine, for the most part, which was better than he could have hoped. Eventually, after a few more hours of this, the bell rang, marking the end of the day's classes. As Alan got up to do some stretch, his stomach started to rumble, garnering the attention of everyone in the room. "Holy hell, you weren't kidding when you said you plowed through your food," Kirishima said, in shock, as Alan embarrassingly rubbed his stomach. He had his first official lunch in the school's cafeteria that day, and he had to force himself to stop from completely cleaning the place out. As it continued to rumble, several of his classmates burst out into fits of laughter. "I was going to ask you how you thought your first day was going, but now I doubt that you'll even be able to hear me," Ashido joked as she took a few pictures with her smartphone. "It really makes you wonder where all of those calories are going." As they all shared in a lighthearted chuckle, Alan packed up his things and headed for the main door. However, when he opened it, he stopped dead in his tracks. Hello?" Alan mumbled as he stared at the crowd that was standing outside of Class A's homeroom. At the front, leading this small pack of students, was a relatively tall boy with purple hair. "Hey, guys, it's Shinso," Midoriya said as he ran up to the boy. "It's been a while," he started as he shook the student's hand. "How have you been?" After asking that question, Midoriya finally noticed the crowd that stood behind him. "Ha! I see you haven't changed a bit, Midoriya," Shinso said as he moved aside to let the other students peer past him. "These guys just wanted to get a look at the transfer student. I was also kind of curious, and so, here I am." The second Alan realized what the boy was saying, he immediately gave him, and the crowd in the hallway, a small bow. "Hello," Alan started as he straightened his hair, which he'd tied back into a ponytail, and dusted off his jacket. "My name is Alan Walker, and it's a pleasure to meet you." As if God himself were shining a spotlight on them, the sun, at just the right moment, shone through one of the building's windows. Its luminescence caused Alan's white hair to almost shimmer in its glow, and allowed everyone in the hall to get a perfect look at him. "Wow, he really does have that weird scar," one of the students said as the bell rang. "I guess that's the end of that." Shinzo mumbled as the crowd dispersed, eager to return to their homes. Before he left, the hero hopeful smiled and returned Alan's bow. "Well, I got what I came for. See you guys tomorrow," he said as he gave them all a wave and headed for the main staircase. Once the hallway was cleared, Alan sighed and started to make his way back to the dorm. "Hey, where do you think you're going, Mr. Walker?" Ashido said in her usual playful tone as she, along with several of his classmates, pulled him back. "We're friends, aren't we? And friends walk home with each other after class, that's a rule." Once she was certain that he'd been successfully leashed, Ashido turned to everyone else and asked the question that was on all of their minds. "Now that classes are over for the day, what do you guys want to do?" Uraraka thought as she tapped her temple. "Why don't we ask Walker? It's his first day and all." "Hey, that's actually a great idea," Kaminari said as he gave their new classmate a playful little zap on the wrist. Once he had the boy's attention, Kaminari took out his phone and brought up a list of movies. "I know you're English, but you must have heard of some of these hits. Why don't we all take a load off and watch a horror movie? We'll bring out some board games as well. It'll be a blast." Yet again, Alan was hit by another wave of culture shock. He barely knew anything about this time's entertainment, much less what was considered good. "You guys should go ahead and decide. I haven't watched any movies recently, so I'll just go along with whatever you choose." As Alan's classmates debated over what to watch, Midoriya frowned and stared at him. "Why does he look so sad?" All Might's successor thought as he raised one of his eyebrows. After dealing with Todoroki during the sports festival, he'd gotten pretty good at recognizing when someone was suffering. And Walker was giving off a few of those signs. "Maybe I'm just imagining things," he thought as he shook his head. Walker, after all, didn't act at all like Todoroki did. He was always upbeat, happy, and willing to help others. And yet, Midoriya couldn't escape the feeling that his classmate was hiding something. "What are you standing around for, Midoriya?" Uraraka asked him as she playfully poked him on his shoulder, snapping Midoriya out of his depressing line of thought. When he realized that he'd been spacing out, Midoriya blushed and started to nervously mumble to himself. "Is he okay?" Alan asked as he watched his classmate with a concerned gaze. Ashido just grinned and shrugged. Once Midoriya got like that, after all, the only cure for him was time. "Give him a few minutes and he'll be back to normal," Ashido said as she flung open their dorm's front doors. "Now then," she yelled as she rushed to their lobby's couch, "I'm going to go ahead and shoot everyone a text to let them know that we're doing this. Can you get the movie started, Kaminari?" As everyone rushed to get everything ready, Alan took in a breath and made his way to the kitchen. His stomach was still rumbling, and he was dying to sink his teeth into something. "Hey, does anyone mind if I have one of these apples?" he called out to his classmates as he stared longingly at a bushel of fruit sitting in the center of the kitchen. The way his eyes sparkled as he stared at it was adorable, and drew the attention of quite a few of his fellow students. "You know, you should really make that face more often, it's cute," Ashido said as she opened the box of one of her favorite games. "Ah, really?" Alan murmured, his cheeks slightly pink, as he scratched the back of his head. Being complimented so casually like that was still jarring to him. Back when he was at the Order, everyone was so somber and serious that such conversations were rare and far between. "Yeah," Midoriya said as he walked over and picked up an apple. After taking a second to shine it on his coat, he turned to his hungry classmate and tossed the fruit to him. Putting on a happy face is part of what it means to be a hero, after all. Alan caught the apple effortlessly, and before Midoriya could even get a word in, he'd completely devoured it. "Thanks," he mumbled after consuming half of the entire bowl. Once his stomach was nice and full, Alan made his way to the lobby's couch and sat down next to Ashido. By this point, Kaminari had managed to gather most of their classmates. Several had brought their homework down. They were no doubt planning on finishing it over the course of the movie. Alan, who thought that was a good idea, opened his bag and pulled out the hero application that Mr. Aizawa gave him. "You're going to do that now?" Todoroki asked him. Alan nodded. "There's no time like the present, right?" he said as Uraraka, Jiro, Ojiro, Sato, Midoriya, and the rest of Class A took their seats. Bakugou was, of course, still holed up in his room, but that didn't surprise anyone. "If you require aid on designing your costume, Walker, I can assist you," Takoyami said as the Birdman sank into the cushiony couch. Thanks for your offer, but no, Alan said as he looked back down at the application. This is something that I have to do on my own. As he got to work, several of his classmates swarmed Yaoyorozu, eager to get help on their homework. Their class vice representative was more than happy to help her fellow students, and by the time Kaminari decided on a movie, most of them had finished their schoolwork. Hey, Kaminari, Minto whispered as he pulled the boy aside. What movie did you choose? In response, when nobody was looking, the electrically charged hero smirked and showed his classmate his choice. The Last Exorcist. It's a terrifying film about demons and stuff, but it's absolutely full of fanservice, too. And nobody will bat an eye about it, either, 'cause it's a horror movie. Minto nodded as he gave Kaminari a thumbs up. You've learned well, my pupil, he said in a disturbingly suggestive tone as he and Kaminari started to laugh. After the two of them had their little moment, Kaminari walked up to the lobby's television and inserted the disc. As the movie started to play, Alan looked back down at his application and pursed his lips. I've got a few ideas, he thought as he tapped his pen against the couch. But all of them leave room in the suit's budget for a little more. None of the prototypes he came up with were anything too flashy or flamboyant. He just wanted something inconspicuous that would protect him when it was necessary. However, because of that, there was always a large sum of the suit's allowance left over. If possible, he'd like to use all of it. After all, he was certain that his classmates did the same, and since he didn't have a quirk, he couldn't afford to further the distance between them. It says here that I'm allowed to request weapons, he mumbled as he nervously chewed on yet another apple. If he chose the toughest and most durable material he could for his suit, that didn't leave him with many options. He couldn't request any personally designed weapons, but that didn't really bug him too much. Eep, Uraraka screeched as a hideous monster flashed onto the screen, snapping Alan out of his thoughts. They must be watching something really scary, he thought as he looked up at the television. As he thought, a beast was currently attacking the movie's main character. It was truly disgusting, however, it was a far cry from any of the akuma that he had faced in the past. And so, without so much as batting an eye, Alan returned to his application. It was around then that he noticed the small pamphlet stapled to the bottom of the paper. What's this? He thought as he took it off and opened it. It's a catalog, to be specific. It was a catalog of various weapons and pre-made suits. No doubt there to give people like him some inspiration. If possible, I'd like some sort of blade. As he thought, none of the offered weapons were claws, so a sword was probably going to be his best bet. However, sadly, most of the options in the blades department were woefully inadequate for his needs. Most of these are katanas and knives, Alan thought as he pinched the bridge of his nose. His issue with those items weren't the blades themselves, it was their weight. It went without saying that his Innocence's blade was far heavier than a standard weapon, and that was what he was used to. For his weapon to be useful in battle, he'd need something that would facilitate his fighting style. I need something with weight that also has some range to it. His sword of exorcism, no matter where he dropped it, always returned to his hands with a flick of his wrist. And since he doubted that he'd be able to change the way he fought on the flip of a coin, a durable way of retrieving his weapons would be necessary. Of course, sometimes, the simplest solutions were the best. And after quite a bit of searching, Alan found one such option. Hey, these look interesting, and they fit in my budget. The blades he was referring to were a pair of heavy knives crafted by a company in India. Dual kukris, huh? He whispered as he stared at their picture in the pamphlet. I think they'd fit me just fine. They were quite a bit heavier than the standard blades, were attached to heavy-duty ropes to aid in retrieval, and there were 2 of them. Plus, they were easy to hide. Normally, a hero wouldn't worry about something as juvenile as hiding their weapons, but Alan, who spent most of his life as an exorcist, saw that as a necessity. After checking a few boxes and sealing the envelope, he was finally finished with designing his suit. Now all that's left is the codename. Hey, Walker, did you finally decide on what you want your outfit to look like? Midoriya asked him as the movie raged on in the background. Alan nodded. It was a long time coming, but he managed to get it done. That's great. Once you decide what your hero name is, you'll be ready to go on off-campus trips with the rest of us. Oh, is that so? Alan said as he lightly scanned over the hero codename application. The rules were fairly simple. You weren't allowed to choose anything profane, obviously, and the actual name had to be under a certain number of characters. With such vague requirements, several ideas whirled through Alan's head in the blink of an eye. What should I choose? If possible, he'd like the name he'd be working under to be something recognizable and simple. He wasn't one for fancy titles, after all, so the less complicated the better. At first, he thought of calling himself Mana in memory of his foster father, but he quickly decided against that. Just in case anyone unsavory in the church does remember some things about the Holy War, I should probably steer clear of mentioning people with connections to the Noah family. Granted, they were all supposed to be dead, but it didn't hurt to be cautious. It took him till the CLMX of the movie his classmates were watching before he finally arrived on an answer. Before he had the chance to forget, he immediately took his pen and wrote his desired name onto his application. I can't really say I'm happy that my best idea came from him, of all people, but it definitely fits. Alan thought with a triumphant smile as the credits started to roll. He'd be so absorbed in his work that he completely missed out on the movie, but that didn't bother him too much. That was definitely an interesting movie. Yayurazu mumbled as she squeezed a nearby pillow close. Alan laughed when he saw that everyone, besides Kaminari who'd already seen the film, were all shivering in their boots. Was it really that scary? Kaminari chided as the boy turned to him. Awa, damn it, the one person I wanted to get scared is perfectly fine. As his classmate pouted in the corner, several people, including Mainta and Ishido, just burst out laughing. Sometimes, fear was the best emotion for inducing a certain level of comedy. As his friends laughed, Alan got up, stretched, and started to make his way up to his dorm room. Are you going to bed? Ida asked him. Alan nodded. Yeah, I've been busy working on designing my suit, so I'm pretty tired. With that, Alan said goodnight to his classmates and swiftly made his way up the dorm stairs. Eventually, he arrived at his room, and after opening the door, he practically collapsed into his bed. Few who ever thought that high school would be so tiring. After taking a moment to change into his nightwear, Alan slipped under the covers, turned off the lights, and allowed his fatigue to wash over him. Within minutes he drifted off into unconsciousness, bringing his first day to a quiet, relaxing end. Several weeks later. Wow, we're having another field trip already? Uraraka said as Aizawa handed her, and everyone else in Class A's homeroom, the day's schedule. Before the UA Culture Festival starts, the administration wanted to give you guys one last chance to gain some knowledge out on the field. We'll just be visiting a couple popular agencies, so you won't be doing any fighting. However, if you want, you're allowed to wear your hero outfits. The second all of them heard that, several of Alan's classmates let out a cheer. Wow, these are all the headquarters of highly ranked heroes, Midoriya yelped with a childlike glee in his eyes. Even though we won't be fighting, the idea of even meeting some of these big shots is like a dream come true. He was definitely ecstatic. However, after his mind processed the final part of what Aizawa said, his enthusiasm came to a screeching halt. Wait, should I wear my costume? Would it be appropriate? Maybe they'll think it looks stupid. Oh man, if they think it looks dumb, then what'll I do? By that point, all of Midoriya's classmates had tuned him out. Is he going to be okay? Alan wondered as he watched his colleagues start to mutter and shake. He knew this was normal for the boy, but still, it confused him every time he saw it. However, he didn't have time to be focused on that. Right as his classmates were rushing to their lockers to get their outfits, Aizawa walked up to his desk. Walker, if you want, your hero outfit has arrived. It's in your locker. After that, Aizawa took out a piece of paper and scanned it over. And, just to be sure, are you serious about your hero name? If you want it changed, you still have a chance. In response, Alan just smiled and shook his head. No, it's fine as it is, but thank you for asking me. With that, Aizawa shrugged and made his way back to his desk. Shoji, who had overheard what their instructor just said, smiled as he waved for the others to come over. Hey, Walker, is it true that your costume has finally arrived? Kirishima asked him, bringing Midoriya back to reality. None of them would lie, they were all insanely curious to see what the costume of a quirkless hero would look like. Also, you never told us what your hero name is. Come on, don't be a stranger, you already know all of ours. The red-haired student's question was accompanied by several curious gazes. Even Bakugou, who was busy taking out his uniform, stopped for a second to overhear Walker's answer. "My hero name? You want to know that?" Alan said as he stood up. "I guess it wouldn't hurt to tell them. It isn't like it's a compromising name, or anything like that." With his decision made, Alan turned to his classmates and gave them the answer they were looking for. "It's August. My codename is August." Needless to say, his choice definitely confused his classmates. "August?" Yaoyorozu wondered as she snapped her fingers. "Wait, isn't that a type of clown?" Honestly, Alan was surprised she got that right. But then again, that wasn't shocking. Yaoyorozu was top of the class, after all. "A clown?" Minta mumbled as he looked up at Walker. "Are you sure you want your hero name to be so? Carefree? That's almost like you're begging to be made fun of." This time, it was Alan's turn to laugh. "Isn't that the point? Heroes are supposed to make people smile, aren't they?" Even though that didn't make his choice of name any less ridiculous, Alan's comeback succeeded in justifying his decision. Before they had the chance to barrage him with questions, Alan made his way over to the side of the room, where everyone's hero suits were stored, and opened his locker. "Wow, they really did make it exactly as I said," he mumbled as he stared at his costume with wide eyes. Even though he hadn't worn it yet, he could already tell that it was a perfect fit. And even though it looked the way it did, he realized immediately how durable it was. "Well, don't be a tease, show us your costume," Ashido yelled as she playfully waved one of her hands through the air. Alan, after unfolding the outfit, did as he was told and turned back to his classmates. However, when they finally got to see his costume, their reactions were, well, they were less than exemplary. "Huh? What sort of hero costume is that?" Ashido whispered, clearly disappointed. Most of Alan's classmates seemed to agree, much to his own disappointment. Although, he couldn't say that was surprising. The main reason for their sour reactions was obvious, after all, in the fact that his costume wasn't really a costume. In reality, it was a fancy black suit with a tie, cufflinks, jacket, and even its own pair of gloves. To be perfectly frank, he looked less like a hero, and more like some stereotypical mob boss. That said, his costume was far from being a normal suit. The material it was made out of was as protective as any of his past exorcist uniforms, and the kukris, which were hidden away in the suit's vest, were durable enough to cut through hardened steel. Maybe it was because he liked the design style, or perhaps it was due to the fact that it reminded him of Mana, who also wore a suit everywhere he went, but Alan's decision was final. "I mean, I don't think that looks like a hero's costume, but you definitely look good in it," Uraraka called out as she clapped her hands together. After that, the rest of class took a moment to carefully inspect Alan's fashion sense, and, after a while, they all had to agree. He definitely looked good in a suit, great even. But that didn't change the fact that his outfit wasn't like theirs in the slightest. Still, their job wasn't to complain. "All right, that's enough," Aizawa said as he slammed his hand against his desk. Once he had everyone's attention, he turned back to the board, wrote down a couple tidbits of important information, and made some announcements. "The bus is scheduled to be here in 30 minutes. If you want to wear your costumes, head to the locker rooms and go get changed. This trip is probably going to take the entire day, so no homework will be assigned tonight." "Sweet, this day just keeps getting better and better," Kaminari announced as he rushed to the front door. "Come on, guys, let's get going. We don't want to be late." "Ah, Tilda, my costume, the rose that rests upon my career's chest. Soon, I will once again blossom in your beauty," Aoyama exclaimed as a cloud of strange sparkles appeared around him. He was quick to follow in Kaminari's footsteps, signaling the rest of his classmates to rush out the door. A tour of hero agencies, Alan thought as he bit his lip. So far, the only agency he'd ever been to was Metal Meister's, and, if possible, he'd like to forget that experience as soon as possible. Hopefully, real heroes will be better people than that scum. He really wasn't in the mood to meet yet another greedy BSTRD. But if Midoriya's reactions were anything to go by, he doubted that was the case. "Kaminari's right," Alan started as he looked out a nearby window at the blue sky above. "I've got a feeling that today's gonna be a good day." 40 minutes later. Unsurprisingly, all of class had decided to adorn their costumes for the trip. Several were so excited that they were practically jumping out of their seats, while some, like him, were just quietly sitting in the back watching the city pass them by. Which agency are we heading to first, All Might? Alan heard Midoriya ask their co-instructor as the bus slowed to a stop at a nearby intersection. When they were told that the top hero would be joining them, Midoriya had a smile so radiant that one could easily mistake it for the sun itself. Said hero, who was busy reading a small book on teaching, turned to Midoriya and handed him a small piece of paper. I believe that we're going to Kamui Wood's agency first. I'm certain that you'll enjoy it. He's a stellar hero. All Might told him as he flipped through a few more pages of his book. Oh, that's good. I should write this down. Alan heard the hero mumble as he intensely studied one of the pages. I guess even the world's best hero has some weak points, he thought as he let out a light-hearted chuckle. So far, the drive to the first agency had been relatively uneventful, although he was thankful for that. At least now he could wait patiently without having to worry about Akuma ambushing him every other day. As he sat there, taking in the atmosphere, Alan noticed that Mr. Aizawa was also studying something. It appeared to be a small emergency radio. He had it turned to a specific frequency, and if his expression was anything to go by, what it was saying must have been bad. Has something happened? All Might asked their homeroom teacher as Aizawa fiddled with a few of the radio's knobs. Nah, some villain escaped his maiden last night, but that report is from the other side of town. I'm just paranoid because our class seems to have a bad habit of attracting trouble. When he heard Aizawa's depressed sigh, All Might smiled and patted his coworker on the back. No villain would ever do anything so close to an agency. I think you can relax a little bit, All Might said as he curiously turned his focus to the radio. But this villain that escaped, do we have any information on them? It never hurt to be cautious, after all. Yet again, Aizawa sighed and continued to fiddle with the radio. Well, according to this report, he's a serial killer that gets his kicks off of butchering entire families. The man's a real handful. His quirk also seems to be a problem. Look here, it says that he has the ability to turn his arms into weapons. As he read that, All Might frowned and nervously bit down on his right thumbnail. That's true. For regular heroes that'd be strong to counter. Do you have any idea where he was last spotted? He asked. In response, Aizawa unfolded a small map of the city and showed it to him. As far as we know, his last appearance was in the slums near downtown. However, before that spotting, there was another one here. As he spoke, Aizawa pressed his right index finger against the upper section of the map, where a large green swath of new buildings and apartments were drawn. That's odd. That's all the way on the other side of the city. How in the world did he manage to get all the way to downtown without being seen? That was a question that Aizawa didn't have an answer for. As the two heroes started to brainstorm possible routes, Alan yawned and returned his focus to the window. No matter what happens, I doubt that either of us will run into him. If this path is correct, then he's obviously been trying to avoid heroes and hero agencies. Aizawa agreed. They weren't in any danger. Serial killers were a cautious sort. Plus, even if the runaway was crazy enough to assault them, or one of the agencies, they'd have more than enough resources to take him down. Let's just focus on this tour, okay? Aizawa said as he rubbed his tired eyes. The last thing we need is the press biting at our ankles. If our class gets assaulted again, we wouldn't hear the end of it. All Might couldn't agree more. And so, with that, Aizawa put away the radio and map, and got up out of his seat. Okay, everyone, he called out to his students as he gave himself a few eye drops. We're nearing the first agency, so everyone get ready to depart. Understood, Mr. Aizawa, Ida called out as he too stood up and started to take roll call. All right, as according to your schedules, we'll now do an attendance check. If you hear your names, please raise your hand. Yet again, Class A's representative surprised Alan. He'd heard that the boy was a stickler for rules and regulations, but to see it in action was, well, it was an experience. For once, the rumors were actually true. As the barrage of names reached his ears, Alan frowned and instinctively placed his hands on the inside of his vest. The dual kukris he'd ordered were holstered there, freshly sharpened and ready to go. If he was back in his time serving as an exorcist, right about now, a swarm of akuma would be assaulting the bus. It was still strong for him to convince himself that, in this world, he wouldn't have to worry so much. Sadly, he doubted that he'd ever be able to fully kick this instinctive reflex. When one served as a soldier for as long as he did, there were certain habits that stuck with a person long after they left the battlefield. This was one of those habits. Alan Walker, Ida called out his name as his class representative turned to him. Just like everyone else, Alan raised his right hand up into the air. Once he was successfully marked down, he returned to his previous position and sighed. For some reason, he felt tired, so unbelievably tired. Alan let out a whistle as he stepped off the bus and stared at the large building before him. Even though it was slightly smaller than Metal Meister's headquarters, the actual design was much more intricate and intriguing to the eye. "Oh, hey, you've finally arrived." The hero the agency was named after, Kamui Woods, said as he landed in front of Class A. However, he wasn't alone, as two other heroes quickly came out of the building to welcome them. "It's Mount Lady and Ed Shot," Midoriya called out, the boy's inner nerd going into full overdrive. All three heroes were respected and relatively popular with the public. Mount Lady, especially, seemed to quite well known by a few of the more educated members of their class. As Mainta and Kaminari started to drool, Alan sighed and turned his attention to one of the nearby alleyways. To this day, he didn't know why he did this. Maybe it was just another old habit of his. Maybe he was just trying to instinctively find the best escape routes, if one was necessary. Either way, he looked down that alleyway, and what he saw, for a second, would change the course of his entire trip. "Why is that manhole open?" he thought as he raised one of his eyebrows. It didn't look like there was any roadwork going on, and no orange cones had been set up. However, before he could ask why this was, Kamui Woods spoke up, breaking him out of his concentration. "Okay, Class A, today I'm going to give you a little tour of my headquarters. If you don't mind, please follow me," Kamui Woods said as he led them into the building. As they walked through the front doors, Mount Lady handed them all a little informative pamphlet. "Thanks again for the help," Kamui Woods thought as he gave his partner a thumbs up. Mount Lady returned the gesture, and soon, the tour was underway. "All Might, it's been a while, how have you been?" Edshot asked the number one hero as they made their way through the office's hallways. In response, All Might just shrugged, before motioning over to his students. "So far, so good. My students have been making excellent progress over the past few weeks, so I'm happy." When he heard that, Edshot nodded, before turning his attention to the students in question. "Yes, I remember most of them from the news." The League of Villains' assault on the class was still fresh in the memory of most professional heroes. "They've definitely gotten stronger, though that doesn't surprise me. After all, you are the one teaching them." Now, that isn't true at all. It's people like Mr. Aizawa and the rest of the stellar teachers at UA that are responsible for their amazing growth. All Might said as he waved off the hero's compliment. As he spoke, Edshot took a moment to look over the members of Class A, and when he did, he noticed something strange. "By the way," Edshot started as he jabbed a thumb in the direction of Class A's newest addition. "Who's the kid? The one with the white hair and scar?" Kamui Woods and Mount Lady's ears perked up when they heard that question. Truth be told, both of them were curious, but neither wanted to risk asking in fear of offending All Might or his class. "Yeah, what's up with that?" Mount Lady said as she continued to hand out pamphlets. "When I was looking through your class roster for potential interns, he wasn't in there." This time, it was Aizawa that answered their question. "He's a new transfer student from England. He's got potential, but teaching him is bizarre," Aizawa said as he placed his hands in his pockets. "Bizarre?" Mount Lady mumbled as she stared confusedly at the student in question. "How so? Sure, his costume was far from the normal hero's getup, but that couldn't be the reason why Eraser, someone who taught hundreds of unique students, called teaching him bizarre." "Well, he's got no quirk, so sometimes I don't know how to deal with him," Aizawa said, causing the three heroes to immediately turn their heads around in shock. He doesn't have a quirk?" Mount Lady exclaimed as she stared the white-haired student, almost as if he were some sort of animal. "Is that even possible? I didn't even know that you could get into UA's hero course without a quirk." Aizawa shrugged. To be honest, all of this was new for him as well. Normally, yeah, his application would have been denied. But apparently he beat Metal Meister in combat, so we didn't really have a choice. Yet again, the three heroes were shocked. "Really? He beat that Metal Meister?" Edshot asked as All Might and Aizawa nodded. Wow, I've got to admit, for someone his age that's incredibly impressive. Metalmeister wasn't anywhere near their level, but he was still a pro hero. For a student to beat him, much less one without a quirk, was simply incredible. Are you certain it wasn't a fluke? Edshot wondered. I mean, not to sound crass, but there's always the chance that he somehow managed to forge his signature. Every once in a while, Yua would get someone like that. However, this was not one of those times. No way, trust me, I witnessed his strength firsthand a few weeks ago. It's the real deal, All Might said. Wow, if it's you saying that then it must be true, Kamui Woods whispered as he rubbed his chin. Still, I never thought that I'd see the day. How in the world does he fight? He asked as he showed class some of his agency's offices and storehouses. In response, All Might just shook his head. He seems to be skilled in hand-to-hand combat, so I assume that he is a close-ranged fighter. All Might mumbled as he crossed his arms. You assume? Edshot interjected. What in the world does that mean? Aren't you his teacher? He asked. Yeah, but it isn't that simple. Truth be told, All Might had no idea how to categorize Walker. For, even though he'd seen him fight, he never got the feeling that he got to see him at full strength. There's something strange about that boy. It wasn't that he didn't trust him, or anything like that. If he had to put it into words, All Might felt that the strength he'd seen didn't match his potential. When compared with the rest of Class A, Walker, in terms of strength, was in the lower half of the class. Several students, such as Jiro, Takoyami, Ajiro, and even Yaoyorozu, he ranked higher in terms of overall combat ability. Walker had skill, nobody debated that, but All Might felt that he was something more. Since the three heroes were still waiting for an answer, All Might just sighed and turned his focus back to them. Well, I haven't known Mr. Walker for anywhere near the amount of time that I have his classmates. That's the main issue. He lied, which was luckily enough to convince his fellow heroes. If you're curious, I'm certain he'll be fine with you asking him, he said as he turned around. However, much to the hero's shock, Walker had disappeared. Luckily, Aizawa had an answer for this. Walker said he had to go to the bathroom. He should be back before we're done here. Kamui Woods' agency wasn't that big. After all, they'd be done with their tour within the next couple of minutes, if everything went well. After this, we're heading off to Best Jeanist's agency, Aizawa said as he made his way to the front of the group. With that, their tour continued on as normal, with everyone completely unaware of what was going on just outside the building. While his class explored the rest of Kamui Woods' agency, Alan found himself stuck in the restroom. Damn it! He cursed as he continued to wash his hands. How in the world did these things get stained? Somehow, probably due to grime on one of the bus's seats. His left glove had become covered in muck and filth. Obviously, he couldn't take it off in front of everyone else, so he had to make do with trying to clean it in the bathroom. Phew, it sure is stuffy in here, he thought as he rubbed some sweat off of his brow. Kamui Woods must have skimped on the cooling bill, cause the bathroom he was in was positively sweltering. I guess no one will mind if I crack a window, he mumbled as he walked over to one of the bathroom's windows and pushed it open. As the cold air rushed in, Alan took a moment to dry off his damp glove and sighed. DMN, this is going to be annoying to wear for the next couple of hours. He didn't have many pet peeves, but one of them, for sure, was when his gloves were wet. I should probably head back to the main group. I don't want to be left behind, he mumbled to himself as he stared longingly out the window. As he did this, he found his eyes wandering back to the alley below. I wonder if that manhole I saw is still open, he thought as he tried to find the aforementioned hole in the ground. Ah, there it is, as he thought. Someone, probably a worker, had closed it off. However, after taking a moment to closely inspect it, Alan immediately knew that something was off. Is that BLD? Right at the edge of the manhole cover, there was a large pool of familiar red liquid. From the manhole, it formed a small trail, leading his gaze from the hole in the ground all the way to the back section of the alleyway. And there, clutching a particularly nasty wound, was a large man. He had neat blonde hair, relatively normal clothes, and was covered in tattoos. However, what made Alan gasp wasn't any of those things. No, what drew his attention was the man's arms. His right was busy holding his wound close, but his left, which hung at his side, had transformed itself into an almost akuma-like cannon. Could he be? Alan mumbled as he leaned closer, trying to get a better look. No, I'm certain it's him. If he remembered correctly, Mr. Aizawa and All Might were talking about him earlier. The family butchering serial killer that escaped from the police's custody. His ability matches what I overheard, and if he's using the sewers to move around, then it all makes sense. He recalled that All Might mentioned something about the suspect suddenly appearing in opposite sides of the city. If one thought about it carefully, then the answer was obvious. Should I go get everyone? Alan thought as he stared at the villain. Currently, he seemed to be heading off to a deserted part of the city. If he continued going down that road, eventually, he would end up in the slums. That place is just outside of Metal Meister's jurisdiction, Alan thought as the villain he was watching dived behind a nearby dumpster for cover. I doubt the hero agency has anyone stationed in that place. That section of town is like a maze. If he gets there, there's a good chance that he'll escape. In a perfect world, he could have called for All Might, or anyone really, to notify the pros about the suspect's location. But life wasn't ever that fair. If I run to get Kamui Woods, there's a good chance that the suspect will notice. And even if he doesn't, there's always the possibility that he'll dive right back into the sewers. Alan didn't care what quirk a pro had. If that man escaped underground again, nobody would be able to find him for weeks. He'd probably have enough time to go on another killing spree. Alan thought as he bit his lip. He knew what he had to do, he just didn't want to do it. Ah, damn it, he yelled as he leapt from the agency's window and plummeted down into the alleyway below. I'll have to be quick if I want to catch up to him. Even if he was using the sewers, that villain must have been particularly fast to get all the way here within the span of a day. If he didn't sprint, there was a good chance that he'd lose him. And so, without a moment's delay, Alan took in a breath and got moving. As he thought, this villain was fast. In an all-out sprint, he could have given Ida a run for his money. If Mr. Aichi hadn't already shown him these streets, he would have lost him a long time ago. However, luck seemed to be on his side. As, before the villain slipped from his gaze, Alan caught him running into a nearby construction zone. It was a labyrinth of metal and concrete, that area. And, with every step, Alan could feel a strange sense of dread wash over him. The villain was definitely here, that much was certain. And so, Alan continued to run. He ran and ran, diving in between the concrete pillars and piles of rebar, before finally arriving on a large open slab of concrete. Oh great, he thought as he came to a screeching halt. I lost him. The man he'd been pursuing had vanished without a trace. However, if Alan had to guess, he probably didn't escape. No. With the way he was moving, it suggested something far more sinister. You know that I'm here, don't you? Alan asked out loud as he moved even further into the complex. You might as well come on out. Heh, you've got guts, kid, I'll give you that. Alan heard the villain say as he came slithering out behind one of the nearby supports. Both of his arms had transformed into weapons, and if his monstrous gaze was anything to go by, he was thirsty for BLD. Tell me, boy, how in the world did you manage to keep up with my speed? He said as he slowly walked to the center of the concrete slab. Unless you have some sort of acceleration quirk, you shouldn't have been able to chase me all the way here. Unless, of course, you went through some hellish training. TCH, this guy's smart. Alan thought as he readied himself for battle. In a moment, he recognized that he wasn't a normal citizen, and immediately hid himself so that he could block the area's only exit. That gaze, you're a hero, aren't you? Judging by your age, I'm assuming you must be a student. The cocky tone he had told Alan that he wasn't taking him seriously at all. Then again, he was a serial killer who had butchered multiple quirk-wielding households, so that wasn't surprising. If you promise not to call your teachers, I might just let you walk out of here alive. When he heard that, Alan scoffed. Don't think that I'll be so easily persuaded, wretch. Alan hissed as he took a few steps back. He got the feeling that the villain was going to attack. However, instead, all he got from the man was an impressed whistle. Well, look at this. It seems like you've actually got some good instinct, boy. The killer said as he scratched his chin. In honor of your talent, I think I'll go ahead and use this. As he spoke, the villain outstretched his right arm, allowing it to morph into a gigantic flesh-rendering chainsaw. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into, little hero. There isn't an official agency anywhere near here, and since we're in the slums, even if the officials learn of our battle, by the time they actually get here, it'd be too late. You've just walked into your grave, and I'm going to be the one who puts you there. We'll see about that, Alan said as the villain revved up his weapon. Once the blades were spinning at a terrifying speed, he smiled and lunged forward, starting off their battle with a loud, bombastic bang. However, as the two of them traded blows, neither seemed to notice the helicopter flying overhead, or the cameras which were now being trained upon them. And over here is where we keep mine, and several others, spare costumes. When you all become pros, a room like this is absolutely necessary, Kamui said as he pointed his index finger up towards the ceiling. As true professionals, it would also be your responsibility to maintain your building, while training any interns that come your way. Mr. Woods, how do you keep in touch with police reports and stuff? I doubt that modern heroes rely only on patrolling to get their information, Kirishima asked as he raised one of his hands in the air. After taking a moment to think, Kamui shrugged and took out his smartphone. Of course, hero agencies usually all have some sort of direct wiring to the villain report center. But there are others as well. For example, if you're like Mount Lady, you may be required to get yourself an agent. Which is why, if you do end up going down this path, you should make sure to keep a careful catalog of all of your official contacts. After his question was answered, Kirishima smiled and nodded. As soon as they finished up there, a small alarm went off on Kamui's phone, signaling the end of the tour. Well, that's it, everyone. If you have any questions, I'm certain that your teachers will be able to answer them, he said as Midoriya, along with everyone else in Class A, thanked the hero before moving on. Where are we going next, Mr. Aizawa? Ida asked his instructor as they all headed out the main door. After taking a second to check the schedule, Aizawa shrugged and turned back to his class. All right, everybody, now we're going to meet up with our bus in this area's central square. Make sure you all stay together, Class A's teacher announced as he quietly made a head count. It didn't take him long to discover that someone was missing. Mr. Walker sure is taking a long bathroom break. Do you think we should send someone to check on him? All Might asked as he reached for his phone, but Aizawa stopped him. No need, he knows where the bus is going to show up next. If he's not there by the time it arrives, then we'll send Midoriya or somebody to track him down. They both knew that Walker was a responsible person. He wouldn't just up and ditch the class. With that, All Might frowned and put away his phone. The rest of the trip to the central square was relatively uneventful, with only the banter of their students to distract them. Where's Walker? He's been missing since we got to Kamui's agency, Ashido said as she worriedly checked behind her. All Might told me that he's gone off somewhere. Don't fret over it. He'll be at the meetup point, you'll see, Kaminari said as their group took a right into the city's main square. Rows upon rows of televisions filled their field of view, some playing ads, others documentaries about heroes. Everything in the main square was moving. It was enough to get all of their BLD pumping, and even made a few of them crack a smile. However, even though they'd arrived at their destination, something was clearly amiss. Hey, Mr. Aizawa, Walker's still not here, All Might whispered into his coworker's ear as they all waited for the bus. Trying to stay calm, Aizawa just sighed and looked up to watch the morning news. Give him 5 more minutes, and then we'll call Kamui, he said as a live feed of the city started to play on the monitor. Hello, everyone, I'm Yui, your anchor for today. This morning we have a little treat for you all, a appealing panoramic of Tokyo, the news anchorwoman said as the camera turned to give a hanging shot of the city skyline. Do you think they can see us from here? Yoraka mumbled when the camera turned to the central square. When it turned towards them, she, along with several of her classmates, started to wave. Oh well, would you look at that? It's Classa from Ua High. And is that All Might next to them? The anchorwoman asked as the camera started to zoom in. Our new generation of heroes, training to keep us all safe. In modern-day Tokyo, such a sight is an everyday occurrence. After that, the helicopter flew away, and quickly returned to its scheduled segment. I wonder if my parents were watching, several of them thought as they puffed their chests out. It was the small moments like that where their pride in being heroes truly shone through. Several of them, as they waited for the bus, continued to watch the broadcast. Some out of curiosity, others out of boredom. We're going through the industrial sector now," the anchorwoman said as the helicopter flew over a large construction area. "Soon, this vast expanse of construction will be replaced by an appealing array of buildings. I'm being told that plans are in the works to turn it into a hero museum, although I can't really say how valid that information is." As she talked, the camera zoomed even closer into construction site, focusing in particular on a few concrete pillars. The popular hero and teacher, Cementos, was hired by this site's agency to aid in the development of this building. With his impressive quirk, according to the head contractor, the business was able to push the construction forward by over 5 months. "Over here, you can see that the supports are..." She stopped. "Huh? What's going on?" Aizawa asked out loud as his eyebrows narrowed. "Is she having a panic attack or something?" he wondered as he, along with thousands of others, turned their focus to the anchorwoman's mysterious behavior. "I'm sorry, but do you think you can fly us over there?" "Yes, I know it's weird. 'Cause I heard something. Just do it. I'll take the blame if it turns out to be nothing," the anchorwoman yelled, causing the pilot to fly the helicopter to the back of the construction site. After taking a few seconds to scan over the area with the camera, that was when they uncovered something terrible. "Is that?" Aizawa yelled out when his eyes finally processed what he was seeing. "Hey, that's Walker," Kaminari yelled as every soul in the main square turned to the screen. "And is he fighting?" Alan coughed up some BLD as he felt the villain dig an iron-clad fist into his gullet. Unlike Metal Meister, who relied entirely on his quirk, this villain seemed to use it more as a tool. Or, to put it in simpler terms, he actually knew how to fight. In response, Alan sent his leg crashing into the killer's left elbow. With the force he used, it easily shattered the man's arm, forcing him to retreat. "Heh, you aren't too bad," the killer said as he licked some BLD off his right palm. "And, would you look at that? It seems that we've gotten ourselves an audience." It was then that Alan finally noticed the helicopter that was hanging overhead. It was so far away, he couldn't see it clearly, but he was certain that a camera was trained on both of them. However, he didn't have the time to worry about that. For, in the moment he was distracted staring at the helicopter, the villain transformed one of his arms into a machine gun and fired. "Go ahead and dance for me, boy," he yelled as he filled the air with hot lead. "Damn it," Alan cursed as he bit his lip. This entire fight had been frustrating. Since he was fighting a human being, and not an akuma, he couldn't rely on his usual methods to disable him. So far, his mind had been busy brainstorming ways of accomplishing this Herculean task. But, no matter what he came up with, he couldn't find a way around the killer's quirk. It was simply too well-rounded to have any noticeable openings. While he attacked with one arm, the villain could transform his other into a shield to protect himself. Without a weapon, he was an extremely annoying enemy to face. However, Alan wasn't the only one who found this skirmish unsatisfying. After firing another group of rounds into the ground, the villain stopped, sighed, and lifted up his weapon. "What's with you, boy? Why aren't you fighting me seriously?" he asked him as he scratched his temple. "I'm assuming that you must have a simple body buffing quirk, but even if that's the case, you aren't hitting me at anywhere near your full strength. Trust me, I can tell." As the villain spoke, he motioned to his battered stomach and legs, which were covered in bruises and fractures. "Listen, I know that you're trying to take me out like a hero, but stop lying to yourself." When Alan heard that, he couldn't help but frown. "What do you mean?" he asked as he prepared to jump back into battle. In response, the villain just laughed and sat down. "Trust me, as a killer myself, I know how to spot one of my kind. It's in the way we fight, you see," the man mumbled as his right arm slowly started to morph. "I doubt that you've killed humans before, but you have killed, that's an unavoidable truth." Yet again, the villain motioned to his battle wounds and sighed. "These aren't the wounds a hero would give me, they're too calculated, targeted, and could easily be lethal if you put a bit more effort into them. So why aren't you trying? If you're used to fighting like a soldier, then fight like a soldier. Stop trying to defeat me and start doing what your instincts tell you to do," he yelled as he pointed a finger towards Alan's jacket. "Or, if that's too much for you, you can go ahead and use those weapons that you've been hiding." "You knew?" Alan asked as he carefully took a defensive stance. The villain scoffed. They'd been fighting for minutes now, of course he knew. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they are, but you're definitely holding back," he said as a disturbing grin wrapped around his face. "Either way, I'm not going to kill you, I'm still a hero," Alan exclaimed as he took a few careful steps forward. In this deadly game of chess, where one move could spell failure for either side, both combatants were giving it their all. However, there was one thing that Alan forgot to account for in all of this, and that was his opponent's human nature. As someone who fought demons his entire life, Alan had temporarily forgotten the evil that could stain a man's heart. And that doubt, that error, is what proved to be his undoing. "What's wrong?" he started as he continued to stare at the sitting villain. "After all that talk, aren't you going to attack me?" In response, the man just laughed and looked up at the sky. "You forget, boy, I'm a villain. I know exactly how you types think, and," he announced as his arm finally finished its transformation, "I know exactly how to make your virtuous heart sting." "Wait, is that? No, it can't be," Alan thought as he stared horrifyingly at the villain's new weapon. If what he was seeing was correct, then the man had morphed his arm into a large rocket launcher. Something that slow would be child's play for him to avoid. But the second Alan saw it, he knew that the missile wasn't for him. As his mind started to race, the villain quickly looked up towards the clouds and aimed the barrel right at the helicopter hovering overhead. To their credit, those piloting said vehicle immediately knew what was about to happen and quickly started to fly away. However, if the villain's smile was anything to go by, that wouldn't be enough. "If I don't stop that rocket, those people will all die," Alan thought as his body instinctively started to move. "Damn it, I can't just bat the rocket out of the sky, either. If I do that, then there's a chance that he'll just fire another one." The only way to save those people was to stop the villain, but he had no way of reliably doing that. "I can't restrain him, and he's too big for me to knock out in time," Alan thought as crucial seconds ticked by. It was then, in that moment, that the retired soldier, finally realized what he had to do. "Now I see," he thought as he reached for his kukris. If he wanted to protect those people, then there was only one option left. It was something that he, and only he, could do. "You had me trapped since the beginning, didn't you?" To protect those precious lives, he'd have to lower himself back into the pit that he'd just crawled out of. However, even though it hurt, Alan knew that he had no other option. "Okay, baby, here comes the train," the villain cried as he prepared himself to fire the rocket. However, right before the madman got the chance to let loose, Alan made his next move. "Let's make some firewoe." The man never got the chance to finish his sentence. "May God have mercy on your soul," Alan whispered, his tone mute, as he forced the blades through the man's neck. Like a swan dancing effortlessly in the morning dew, he removed the villain's head from his body. Amen. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Discarab on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.